defensive players left, and I think that's what they're going to look at. Cornerback, defensive tackle, safety, because I think the offense, it's pretty damn good right now.
Yeah, there's a couple places I wouldn't mind seeing them draft in the offensive side. I mean, obviously left guard is a question right now. I don't really want to rely on Kenyon Green going into the season. And I could see them taking either, like a depth running back, not with a second-round pick probably, although I know some on the station have advocated for that. I would say that's more like a fourth-round pick. And look, wide receiver, I don't really want it here at 42, but Stephon Diggs is on a one-year deal. Nico Collins going to his last season.
I'm out.
Not at 42. Not at 42.
No wide receivers. They're fine.
The entire
They're
draft?
fine. The entire rest of the draft. They are fine. What? We're going to get more and more wide receivers? Okay, maybe 4th, 5th, 6th round or something like that. No. Today, I do not want a wide receiver. Only 3 positions I really would like to see the draft at.
3? All right.
Specifically, cornerback and defensive tackle.
I'm good with that.
Safety, we'll see, because there's still some guys left on the free agent market. Running back wouldn't be bad. But I want to stay away from the wide receivers.
I mean, that's fair. And look, no, if and I don't know how you feel about this. If you're truly like a best player available sort of guy, or best player available amongst needs, I'm of the latter. So I fall into give me best player available if that player plays left guard, D tackle, corner, or safety.
Okay,
that's what I want at 42. And thankfully, as you pointed out, with the run on offensive players, especially quarterback and wide receiver in the first draft, like. A lot of the guys that we would talk about in the Killer Bees when the Texans still had their 23rd overall pick, hey, would you be happy with, Kool-Aid McKinstry? Hey, would you be happy with Cooper DeJean? A lot of these guys that we're talking about are Jazon Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois. A lot of these guys that we were talking about at 23 as possibilities there are still there on the board. And when you look at the board, there's a lot of guys there that I think the Texans, this really fell in a way to where they're going to have their pick of someone that's really going to help them for next season.
So there you go. And you mentioned a couple of those. What we are doing over the course of this draft is, referring to the old Bible of one Lance Zierlein, who you can hear here, of course, on John and Lance in the mornings. And you take a look at some of those cornerbacks that you just mentioned, whether it is Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid.
Enos Rakestraw.
Right. There's a lot of corners still available. The real question is going to be that over the next couple of picks, are the Houston Texans actually going to be able to select one of those? Because if you take a look at some of the mock drafts that are out there, a lot of people believe that cornerback is in high demand for some of those teams.
They are, but I think at least with these next couple picks, the Bills, I assume, are going to draft a wide receiver. I could see a couple other teams coming up, like the 5th pick in the second round right now is the Chargers. I think they could take a wide receiver. The Patriots are the second pick in the second round. I think they could take a wide receiver. So there's three picks in the top 5 of this round in the second, with teams needing a wide receiver, and there's still some names like Adonai Mitchell and a few others that I think wide receiver makes sense for those teams. So even as many corners and D tackles and players that we might want for this team, the Houston Texans, that fit their needs that are available, I think you're going to have even a better shot for them, because these teams up early on in the second round, I think there's a lot of wide receiver needs, and it's a deep wide receiver draft.
Yes, it is. There are a couple that are mocked to be going early in round 2. There's also some potential trades that we could see in the near future. Brandon Ayuk is someone whose name has been thrown around as a potential trade.
His text to the 49ers.
I did not. What did he say?
So he apparently texted the 49ers right after they drafted. It was Ricky Pearsall, right? Yeah, Florida. And I'll try to pull up the exact wording of his tweet here in a second. But basically, he texted the 49ers general managers like, "Damn, that's a good pick. Actually, I can't even be mad at that." So apparently, we saw C.J. Stroud. On the podcast with Micah Parsons talk about how he really wanted Ricky Pearsall. So yeah, I really wasn't. I know you're a Florida guy. I really wasn't that high on Pearsall, but apparently guys in the NFL are quite high on them, including quarterbacks and wide receivers.
I'll be honest, most of these prospects, I have no idea whether or not they're going to be a good pro. I know I didn't watch this guy at Florida, but it is interesting to see the 49ers select a wide receiver in the first round. So you take a look at the top of round number 2, and we'll see if a trade is made over the next couple of minutes, because the Buffalo Bills are first on the clock. Maybe the Bills decide to go the wide receiver route. Maybe the Bills decide to, trade this pick or something like that. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I know the New England Patriots are up right afterwards.
What do you want them to take?
I don't care. They are one of the teams that is linked to Brandon Ayuk potentially. So I think the first.
And by the way, I found the exact text. So this is from Adam Schefter. 49ers wide receiver Brandon Ayuk texted GM John Lynch and head coach Kyle Shanahan moments after they selected his former, apparently, I guess he was teammates at Arizona State, but Ricky Pearsall with their first-round pick Thursday night. The message for Shanahan, quote, fire pit, can't lie.
Okay.
It's very 2024.
That is so 2024.
It's like, man, I'm so mad at you, but damn, you guys did well. Good job.
I think he has unfollowed them on social media.
I mean, he might as well. They just drafted his replacement.
That's the next move. So we see now Roger Goodell at the podium. I'm sure he is getting booed.
Oh, he did last night. He does every year.
He has, it seems like, human shields via, I believe, all the Walter Payton Man of the Year nominees. I could not tell.
I know Cam Hayward. Oh, you're talking about right now? Yeah, I know Cam Hayward was out there last night. He came out there and tried to get in front of the boos. I mean, hell, they were even booing people when, children were coming up to the stands. So
see, but Roger Goodell, he loves to bring everybody up, and I think he wants to be cheered and wants to be liked. But, man, that skit that they had to open up the NFL draft that they showed on the NFL Network, I think they showed it on ESPN with Eminem, where Roger Goodell was quoting a couple of lyrics from some of Eminem's songs.
Which song did he quote? I didn't see this.
Too many. And he quoted a couple of them, and then at the very end, he was trying to make it seem like he and Eminem are trying to be friends or something like that.
Then you do a bro hug on the stage, dapped him up.
Yeah, it was.
Try to glean some street cred off of Eminem.
Street cred, likability, whatever. I'm not 100% sure what.
Hell, he even tried to bring up all the Detroit Lions. I remember at one point they all came up and gave the lamest little 2-second pump up, like Barry Sanders,
you know what?
This is why Detroit's great. Thank you, Detroit.
I actually liked that part of the draft, but the skit before I didn't really like so much. So Goodell is still talking. I hope everyone is booing throughout this. There are some children behind him. Perhaps they are being used as human shields of some sort.
Didn't work yesterday.
No, it did not. They were booing him no matter what. I have no idea who that is. Is that JJ McCarthy?
It's JJ McCarthy.
Okay, so he's wearing a hat now, and now they're going back. We're just listen. I'm just showing what's going on.
We're in the time filler portion of the NFL draft.
Right, exactly. Now there is a swath of, I believe, Michigan football players who are walking to the center podium.
Oh, they're bringing the national title up.
Right, and of course, Detroit is located in the state of Michigan. Michigan is the state where the University of Michigan is located, and they just won the national title. So.
Rampant with Wolverine population?
I guess so, yeah. So they're really just trying to bring Detroit and to bring Michigan back single-handedly tonight. And you know what? Good for them. Good for them. They needed it. They needed a big-time victory, and guess what? They're getting it.
It's
Lions
been quite
legends,
a moment for the last couple seasons for the Lions in Michigan and Detroit.
It really has. It's not rock bottom anymore. Just get some water for Flint, and maybe we're off on the right track. So
if you're tracking at home, it took us 6:10 till we got a political reference, topical news.
Well, that's what we got to do here when we're filibustering, and the draft is already taking a little bit too long. So, okay, we know that the Bills are on the clock. After them, it's the Patriots, Cardinals, Commanders, Chargers, Titans again, Panthers, Commanders again, Packers, and then the Houston Texans are finally on the clock. There are a couple of AFC contenders who have already made picks thus far. We saw yesterday the New York Jets, who I think with Aaron Rodgers are a contender. They got a tackle from Penn State, Ola Muyiwa Fashanu. Apologies to his family if they are listening, and I butchered the pronunciation.
I'm sure you nailed it.
Of that, another offensive lineman for the Cincinnati Bengals. Both the Jets trying to protect Aaron Rodgers, the Bengals trying to protect Joe Burrow. Amarius Mims, a tackle from Georgia. Nice to see them get a draft pick in with a lot of questions about what's going on with T. Higgins, their number 2 wide receiver. Also with Trey Hendrickson, their good pass rusher. The Miami Dolphins, they selected Chop Robinson, who is a linebacker from Penn State with the 21st overall pick. Not sure how much of a contender Miami still is, but with the Bills clearly taking a step in the other direction, you would think that they naturally leap up in the power rankings in the AFC. Somehow the Chiefs were able to get Xavier Worthy, who you are very familiar with,
sure.
Brian McDonald from his time at Texas, and the last pick, the Ravens selected a defensive player, Nate Wiggins, a cornerback from Clemson, and you almost assume by default that the Ravens nailed that. So these are the teams that are competing with the Houston Texans.
Anytime they draft a defensive back, I just assume they nailed it. It feels like the Ravens.
Kyle Hamilton.
I mean, you can't call them, DBU because they're not a university, but it feels like whenever, kind of like the Steelers with wide receiver for years. Every time the Steelers drafted a wide receiver, it's like, well, that guy's going to be great.
Correct.
And the Ravens have done that. I know you don't like the Steelers. I felt I could see.
No, I don't mind them. I mean, they've had a good track record with wide receivers.
They have, and the Ravens have done that at defensive back. So is there? We've talked about some of the players that could possibly be there for the Houston Texans. Is there any specific name you're hoping for, any specific position? I know you seem like defensive tackle, corner, safety.
There's no one in particular that I'm really hoping that they get. It's really just go after a cornerback or a defensive tackle, especially if there's a lot left on the board. I trust Nick Caserio. If Nick Caserio is making a decision, for the most part, I'm going to agree with it, unless they end up drafting, I don't know, Spencer Rattler in this round or something like that.
That would be a reason for concern.
That's pretty much it.
That would be a reason for concern.
I think we all should be at a point where when we look at what Nick Caserio has been doing over the last couple of years, and at least give him some benefit of the doubt. I understand there's always going to be some second guessing that goes on with a lot of people that believe that they know what they're talking about when it comes to the NFL draft, but I have sort of accepted the fact that, you know what? I know what I don't know, and I know that when it comes to these prospects, it's a lottery ticket with just about every single one of these. Will the Houston Texans trade one of these picks? I'd be open to it. Hopefully, though, they will go after some defensive pieces because they do not have a cornerback number 2. If Steven Nelson is a free agent, they, I think, could use some help at safety because, honestly, you take a look at the guys that were not able to play center field for them last year. Lots of plays, big plays deep. Plays down the seam to tight ends, especially in the playoff game against the Browns, that you would like to see not be a thing anymore. And on top of that, defensive tackle, you take a look at who they have. Okay, Nico Autry is going to be playing a little bit of defensive tackle, but you take a look at the rest of the depth chart. I mean, we're talking about guys like Khalil Davis, right? Foley Fatukasi,
Tim Settle,
Kurt Heinisch, right? It's a lot of guys who you look at and you think, okay, maybe these are rotational pieces. Exactly. Yeah. You don't really think of any of those guys as starters, per se.
So, I mean, looking at this, and I know we got to get to break in a second, but, I mean, if there's one thing we know about Nick Caserio and his time with the Texans is dude loves to trade. He trades up, he trades down, but he trades in the draft. If you had to pick trade up or trade down from pick 42, where are you leaning? Is there I mean, I know there's not a specific name that you want individually, but I mean, do you see the depth at the position of needs and think you can trade back and still get somebody, or are you more wanting to be aggressive?
If they want a cornerback, if they want their cornerback, they might have to trade up. And again, I'm just looking at mock drafts. I think some people know what's going on, but especially towards the beginning of the second round, because I'm sure that there have been some rumors out there on the streets, if you will, in the NFL cognoscenti. But the mock draft that I'm looking at right now has 3 cornerbacks going off the board with the first 4 picks. We heard not too long ago, at last night, there were rumors that the Houston Texans were looking to trade up in the draft. Supposedly, they were looking to go and get Quinion Mitchell from the Philadelphia Eagles.
God, man, that would have cost a lot.
It probably would have cost a lot.
That was the mid-20s.
You're right. So maybe they got to a point where they're like, all right, you know what? That's enough. But Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Enos Rakestraw Jr., the mock draft that I'm looking at right now, and again, it's a mock draft. Who knows how much stock to put into it, has the Bills, Cardinals, and Commanders taking those 3 with 3 of the first 4 picks of the second round.
Bills pick is in, by the way. I'm not sure when ESPN's actually going to announce it, but the Bills pick is in. I assume this is going to be a wide receiver. I don't think you're going to have a problem here with one of the players you covet going off the board for the Texans.
We will see what happens. We will tell you what happens on the other side. It is ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's NFL draft coverage with Paul Gallant, with Brian McDonald. We got Del Olayeye about to come in right now. Stick around.
You're listening to ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's 2024 NFL Draft Special. Now back to the Veritex Community Bank Studios with Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
We've got Adele, and we've got the first pick of the second round. The Buffalo Bills go wide receivers, so 24 of the first 33 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft are offensive players. Del, you were sharing some interesting insight on Keon Coleman, a Florida man, Florida State man.
Yes.
In the commercial break.
I've seen quite a bit of him and hated against him because of my biases. He is a transfer from Michigan State who took off at Florida State. Florida State was big in the portal game, and it led them to an undefeated regular season and an ACC title. He's not going to be a separator on the NFL level. He's a big target. So the Bills, we know they need help. They went with an outside receiver. I know as the broadcast was going today, they showed Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell from Texas. But I thought if the Bills were looking for a future number one potentially, Keon Coleman would be that guy. Now, he has some versatility. He returned punts. I don't think that'll be what he does on the NFL level. He's not as sudden as you want as far as NFL punt returning, but they go get themselves a big outside receiver. The question will be how he'll handle the physicality, because that's the way he's going to have to win.
Okay. They just showed him making an awesome one-handed catch over the middle. More of a possession guy per Dell. We also just saw a trade. So the Los Angeles Chargers, who yesterday selected Notre Dame tackle Joe Alt, they have traded with the New England Patriots for the second pick of the second round. It looks like the pick is in, and we'll see them announce it in just a moment.
They're another team desperate for wide receiver help. We know they have a new regime. We know Justin Herbert lost his top two receivers. So with receivers potentially coming off the board, this is a spot possibly for another one.
Yesterday, Jim Harbaugh was asked why the Chargers did not go get a wide receiver, and in a very Jim Harbaugh fashion, when asked, hey, why didn't you go get a weapon for Justin Herbert, he said, well, tackles are a weapon.
That is going to be the philosophy. If it follows up with what Greg Roman said when they're asking, how are you going to help Justin Herbert take another step or get better? Running the football helps the quarterback. It's what Greg Roman said.
Of course he said that.
So I think they're taking a wide receiver because that seems like the obvious thing after getting your tackle, but you never know. Maybe a guard's in play or a blocking tight end. You never know with Jim Harbaugh. He may turn Justin Herbert into a wing T quarterback. We never know what he'll do with him.
Oh, there's nothing worse than the wing T.
No.
That was the offense that we had in high school.
But you think about what Greg Roman's done in the NFL. He helped Harbaugh get and make Kaepernick a viable option at quarterback, and then he had Lamar Jackson. So that is a departure. Herbert's athletic, but he's not those guys.
I was about to say, Justin Herbert can't run because he's white. What's going on here?
He can't run because he can't be those guys. Some of the most athletic quarterbacks we've ever seen in the last 15 years. So the thought is, what are they going to do with him? They've gone with the route that we expected Harbaugh to go. The question is, will they go get him some help? We know they drafted a couple wide receivers last year, both from TCU. The first rounder, Quentin Johnson, was, let's just say, a failure in his first year.
Yes.
It doesn't mean he won't be better in the second. So do they go wide receiver? Do they find cornerback help? That was a bad defense that kept their older Russians and Khalil Mack and Bosa. They need help at corner because J.C. Jackson was not the answer. You should know about him a little bit.
I remember him very well from his second stint and first stint in New England.
So what do the Chargers do as they try to help Justin Herbert not get another coach fired? Because it's now 2 and 4 years for Justin Herbert.
It has been, man. Justin Herbert is essentially football, the online cognoscentes, ASPCA ad. Everyone always feels bad for Justin Herbert. I am curious about how quick a turnaround with the Chargers could be. I think with Jim Harbaugh, it's pretty fair to assume that there will be a turnaround. And Ladd McConkey, as you said, Del, is off the board. Tell us about Ladd McConkey.
Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. He is, I know we talked about Justin Herbert and his whiteness. So Ladd McConkey will, I guess, add to the whiteness on offense.
He sounds like a white guy, yes. Ladd McConkey, and he is a white guy. Look at that.
I don't know if I had to explain that when his first name is Ladd. But I will say he's kind of he was a do everything all purpose guy at Georgia. He was a quick screen guy, end around guy, a bubble screen guy. So if you're looking for versatility, he's that guy. I don't know if you're going to think of him as a down the field threat. He's quick. I don't want to say more quick than fast because that leads into stereotypes. But I will say short area quickness is his thing. He's a baller. I mean, and certainly they do need those, particularly with the lack of them, unless they're going to depend on Joshua Palmer. So they do need ballers. He is one of them, and I think he'll help in the the intermediate stuff for the LA Chargers, the question will be, do they have enough juice in their wide receiver core to get downfield?
And to go back to what we were talking about just a moment ago, the Chargers, they've got the cool uniforms. They've got a really transcendent young quarterback, at least per many. They've got a head coach in Jim Harbaugh, who's already one of the biggest personalities in the league, and he's only been in it for a couple of months. I am curious if this is one of those teams that we're looking at, came in last place last year, 5 wins. If this is the, they did that over the course of 1 year, because they do have a lot going in their favor. And now that they had a tackle in Joe Alt and they had Ladd McConkey, you would think that this offense is going to be better. The defense, though, still's got some work to do.
There are questions there. The issue, or maybe the question for the Chargers, is how do they view themselves? Do they view themselves as a quick turnaround? Harbaugh's going to have a lot of leeway to build the roster the way he wants, so he may sell to ownership that, hey, we're not 1 year away. I know we have Justin Herbert, but this roster itself isn't ready to win, and we've got our quarterback locked up, so we don't have to worry about that in terms of pressure. I am interested to see how they approach this season. Now, Alt is not a flashy name, but if we're building from the trenches like we know they love to do, that sets a foundation. And will they become a team who leans on Justin Herbert because of the previous years and what we believe him to be as a talent, or will they go in a different approach and turn him into like a super game manager, because that's what Harbaugh wants from his offensive football team?
We'll see what happens with the Chargers this season. They just took Ladd McConkey. We have a second trade with only 3 picks made in the second round. Looks like the third pick is about to be made. The Atlanta Falcons, who broke everyone's brain yesterday by drafting Michael Penix with the 8th pick after giving Kirk Cousins a massive contract. Kirk Cousins apparently not thrilled, at least taken aback by Michael Penix being drafted. Now they have traded up to that number 3 spots. Pretty surprising. Where do you think that they're going to go at this moment in the draft? I know there's a lot of cornerbacks available. There does seem to be a rush on wide receivers.
I know there's some thought that they would go edge rusher, or at least to help their defensive line. That was a thought maybe when they were at number 8. Of course, we didn't see the first defensive player go until the teens, so that might have been an overdraft position for them to take a defensive player there. You might look at edge rusher. I think that would have been their top need. Certainly, it wouldn't have been quarterback. But they don't. What we know now, they don't care about what we think their needs are. They'll do what they want. So maybe they take a receiver. That certainly that could help Drake London and Bijan Robinson. But I would say if they're trying to stamp out the criticism, if they cared about media criticism, we would look to a defensive end type who can get after the passer. The question will be, because of the run on those in the mid to late first round, is there one they think should be picked? They're trading up, so they feel like they need to jump ahead of someone. I am interested to see if they go BPA or they decide to help their edge pressures.
What if they go get the best quarterback available again? Because, listen, you got to think about the future after Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, drafting Spencer Rattler may kill off any Falcon fan that hasn't been killed off yet.
If they traded up for this, it would be the funniest thing ever. I don't think that they actually did that. I suppose, though.
There's a kid in a A.D. Mitchell jersey. Now, A.D. Mitchell, is that that was a Bijan jersey.
That was a Bijan
Robinson
jersey
Texas
with
jersey.
Texas, right.
Well, maybe they team up. They never played together because A.D. Mitchell was with the Georgia Bulldogs at the time, but maybe they go get another Texas player to help out their offense. I do think, though, that a potential corner or an edge rusher would help their cause. But I do like how everyone was so upset about the Falcons. No one really cares if the Falcons do anything. It was more like they offended everyone's sensibilities, that how dare they make that pick. Everyone has an ego. They like to be right about what they think is going to happen. Is anyone outside of Falcon fans really that upset they took Michael Penix? In fact, I appreciate them for providing us with content, honestly.
I think it's funny to look at in totality. I'm with you. I like Michael Penix.
Yes.
If the Falcons like Michael Penix and they felt like, hey, we're going to draft him at number 8 going into the draft, hey, go and do you. It's more just a bunch of things along the way where, okay, you're with the 8th pick, taking the 4th, at least in the eyes of the other teams in the NFL draft, the 4th best QB. On top of that, you did not hire Bill Belichick because you didn't want to give the team control to Belichick. Understandable given his draft history of late. And then the general manager afterwards is saying, well, optimally, Kirk Cousins is going to be here for the next 5 years until Michael Penix comes in. It's a lot. It's a lot in totality to sit back and say, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it feels like that was nonsensical. Maybe don't add we hope to have Kirk for 4 or 5 years. Just say, hey, we took the best player available. We like both our quarterbacks and keep it moving. Don't add that soundbite where people can make fun of you. And they take a defensive tackle. So they go with a defensive. Oh, is that an offense? That
is a defensive tackle. Rook or Horo.
I don't come to me on this one.
I was gonna ask.
Don't ask me about Ruke O'Horo. I'm sure Dabo has a lot to say. He's a Clemson defensive tackle. Dabo generally likes to call teams and tell them to take their players. Look, if we're just going to we're going to speculate because they played at Clemson. They've had a history of producing defensive linemen. One of the guys just got one of the biggest deals in defensive lineman history, and Christian Wilkins. He's now a Las Vegas Raider. I will say I didn't see a lot of Ruke or Horo make plays, and the name is going to devastate a lot of people. Might be more devastating than any play he ever makes. But as far as people trying to pronounce his name, we'll see what the draft people say. But he's an angular type. In fact, if we're talking about guys the Texans would have been after as far as defensive tackle because of his body type, he would be one of those guys. D'Amico in the past hasn't been all about the pluggers. The 6'4", 290 guys probably more fits the mold. But he is an Atlanta Falcon, and they take a guy that people in that area are going to be familiar with, just because of the ACC and Clemson, and they do have some pull in that area. So he was a good player. I just can't speak to the greatness when I can't even pronounce his last name.
I mean, you can't pronounce his last name. Try to pronounce his first name.
I know he gave us a break with the first name.
Okay,
when they shortened it.
So his given name is Ogenarukwe Orororo. So this is how to pronounce his last name.
Okay.
I'm looking online and I'm looking closely to make sure I know it. Last name pronunciation, all of the H's are silent.
Oh, look at that.
So it's O-ro-ro-ro.
Okay, that's easier than
That's actually pretty easy.
Dealing with the H's.
It's more when you see all of the letters together, specifically in the first name. You're like, what in the heck is going on here? So that is pick number 3 off the board. The Washington Commanders with the 4th pick of the second round are on the clock. The Houston Texans with pick 42nd are up 10th in the second round, barring a trade. I'm going to butcher your name now. Now I'm just overconfident. I'm not self-confident in my ability to pronounce anything right now. Del Olaleye.
Olaleye.
Del Olaleye.
Yeah.
Paul Gallant. ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's draft coverage continues after this.
ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's NFL Draft Special continues. From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
All right. Round number 2. We are about to see the 4th pick of the second round. 2 of the first 3 picks, trades. Chargers traded up to 2. Falcons traded up to 3. The Washington Commanders now on the clock. Roger Goodell at the podium. Looks like he's about to announce the pick, Del. So we've seen thus far wide receiver Keon Coleman go to the Buffalo Bills. Wide receiver Ladd McConkey go to the LA Chargers. And Ruke Orororo has gone to the Atlanta Falcons, a defensive tackle from Clemson. Patriots are on the clock. Roger Goodell is announcing the pick right now. There is somebody standing to his left. Is that Darryl Green?
That's Darryl Green, who has to wear a hat with his number on it.
Fastest man alive at one point.
He
in the NFL at least.
I find the fact once they start to let the fans into the building and having to entertain them, I've found the draft a bit insufferable. Mostly because of not the Darryl Green thing, honor to the legends. I'm down with that. But we have to deal with stoppages because hey, this group is here, and like, do I care that the Michigan National Championship team is walking out there? I'm aware of the connection, why they're doing it and where. But
Did you know Michigan is in Michigan?
Yes. But the minute they allowed fans in and it became more of an entertainment spectacle, I felt the draft took a downturn. Look, I'm never going to go to a draft because I don't care that much. I'm not going to put on a jersey and sit there and root on and either get happy about what Chris Greer does or get upset about it just because of a player he picks. I don't know how good that player is going to be. No one really does. But once they opened it up, I decided, you know what? The draft isn't for me. I know it's crazy that I'm doing this show. I agree to it, so I understand that. But watching the draft, not for me. I will keep track.
Don't react to the draft.
I will react.
I'm on the same page as you.
But as far as all of this that's going on,
the spectacle, it's too much.
It's not that it's too much. It's just I don't like it. That's all.
You know what? I actually like it when the ex-players come in.
I don't mind that part.
And go Drew Pearson mode.
Sure.
Or even kicker David Akers mode, where Pearson trolled Eagles fans and Akers trolled Cowboys fans. I don't know if there's much of an audience to troll when it comes to a Commanders fan with the Lions. Maybe Darryl Green was on that team for the Redskins that
he was
beat
on the
the
team
Lions
in the NFC title game.
So you know what? There we go. There's the potential.
If for whatever reason he decided he wanted to, yes, he could very well troll them.
That would be really funny if he was doing that right now. But we're still waiting for the official announcement of the Washington Commanders.
I think
pick.
we're at a disadvantage, Paul, because we're on YouTube. We're watching this on YouTube TV.
So we're on a delay.
The pick is already in. I already know who it is. And
how about you announce who the pick is? Because my Twitter is not helping me out right now.
Jerzon Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois, is the pick for the Commanders. So we've seen the 2 defensive tackles go off the board. So maybe Atlanta felt that Washington would have taken Orororo. So they decided to trade up to get ahead of the Commanders. The Commanders go Jerzon Newton, who some people thought would have been like a early 20s to mid-20s first-round pick. They get him at the 4th pick in the second round. So if we're talking about alleged value, that's one of the teams who got some, because that's a guy who at some point people thought would have been the first defensive tackle off the board.
Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, which is noteworthy when you're in a conference that features Ohio State and Michigan, and you're on one of those teams that is essentially cannon fodder for those 2 squads.
Certainly.
Illinois coming off a pretty good season, right, by their standards. So he's a big part of that. I guess the bad news, if we're looking at it from a Houston Texans perspective, is that is another defensive tackle off the board early in round number 2. I would think, Del, and I don't know what you're looking for them to do or what you would do if you were Nick Caserio, but I want a corner or a defensive tackle, best player available, with at least one of their 3 picks as of right now tonight.
We've talked about it quite a bit on the Mopey and Mape show, otherwise known as the Del Olaleya show, about the Texans and how close they are to the contenders. We know the Chiefs are out of this world because of the guy playing quarterback, but we know the Texans didn't score an offensive touchdown against the Ravens, who you might think is the second best team in the AFC. So sure, you have Tank Dell healthy, you have Nico Collins, you have Stephon Diggs, but the way the Ravens beat beat the Texans is they won on the interior and their defense. I think that's the biggest gap for the Texans: strength in the middle of their defense and the offensive line. So I'm right there with you. I think they're a little short on defensive tackles. Is Danico Autry going to be a full-time tackle, or was he brought in to be an inside rusher on passing downs and now a backup defensive end behind Will Anderson and then Noah Hunter? So if I'm the Texans, if your corner that you like is taken off the board before you get to pick with your first, second round pick, I am hoping and praying one of the defensive tackles you like is still there, because if I am pointing to their biggest weakness beyond the secondary, it is that middle of the defense.
The middle of the defense definitely could use some help. They had a couple of games, and specifically that game against the Indianapolis Colts, where they really had a tough time stopping the run.
Yeah.
And they are very fortunate that for whatever reason, the Colts didn't just have their second string running back on the field for a 4th and short. They had their third string running back on the field. Another wide receiver off the board. The New England Patriots take Jalen Polk from wide receiver, not Rome Odunze, but another Washington wide receiver off the board, in addition to Michael Penix. Big year for the Huskies.
And there might be one more later in the draft. But yeah, so Jalen Polk's a player who got overshadowed because Rome Odunze clearly was the best wide receiver on their roster. But because of Michael Penix and that offense who loved to throw the ball down the field, he was a big play threat. We're looking at the numbers right now. 69 receptions, almost 1,200 yards, and 9 TDs. So he's a guy who will catch balls down the field. Unfortunately for Texas people, if they're watching on ESPN, is showing his ability down the field in the playoff game. He is one of those dudes you're going to hope can stretch the field a little bit. Once he's going to be able to make some plays down the field, and you have to hope that Drake May, now your quarterback, whether he starts immediately or starts later in the year, or maybe even next year. Who knows what the plan is for the Patriots? We'll trust that guy, because that's what Michael Penix did. He threw the ball in areas for those guys to make plays, and they helped him become one of the best quarterbacks in the college last year.
Yeah, if you watch that game against Texas in the college football playoff, Penix had a lot of balls, and I'm assuming it's because of the wide receivers that he had. Unfortunately, in the national title game, he just had nowhere to go. He was getting smacked around by the Michigan front seven.
Tenderized his ribs.
Oh, yeah, they killed him. That was a violent assault upon Michael Penix. I got to say, I thought he showed a lot of toughness
to stay in that game.
Because he was getting smoked play after play after play. So we have a couple of picks, I believe, in. The Tennessee Titans are next. We saw the Titans draft an offensive lineman yesterday, and the Panthers are on the clock now. We'll see if David Tepper has tried to assault any hosts or hostesses in the Greater Carolina era. Yesterday, the Titans took a tackle from Alabama, J.C. Latham. Clearly, their big number one goal is to protect the young Will Levis, who no longer has Derrick Henry to turn around and hand the ball off to.
Well, you mentioned the tackle. Will they go defensive tackle? Justin Simmons certainly still there, a big-time force. But, they lost to Nico Autry. So getting some help on the defensive front might be something they're focused on. And also, is the combination of Burks and Hopkins enough at wide receiver?
I don't think so.
And
if you're Will Levis, you probably need all the help you can get. Where with someone like a C.J. Stroud or a Patrick Mahomes, you can probably make a little bit of chicken soup with chicken bleep.
Yeah, if I'm Will Levis, I'm hoping now that you got me a tackle, can you get me a weapon? Because I can't depend on Burks, and DeAndre Hopkins is there for a short time, not a long time. Had a nice year last year, but at 31 years old, I could see them at some point and him thinking, how many years left do I have at playing at a level where I can go help a team win games? And if the Tennessee Titans aren't at a point where they can compete at a high level, I could see him moving on. I don't know if they'll trade him, but certainly after this season. So I think a wide receiver could be in the cards for them, simply because at some point you have to tell your quarterback, if you believe in Will Levis, that we're going to go get you that help. So you can look out for that.
Here we go, guys. It looks that the Tennessee Titans are going to take somebody that a lot of Houston Texans fans were hoping they would get.
Are you talking position like corner? Did they take a corner? Or did they take a defensive tackle?
They took a defensive tackle, a local defensive tackle, who may be in some issues, but he is a large human being. The Titans are selecting T'Vondre Sweat with the 38th pick of the NFL draft. So run on wide receivers, run on defensive tackles to open up the second round.
We heard about Nick Caserio allegedly being aggressive, trying to get back to the first round. Maybe this is the reason why. He's not finding any the people in front of him aren't doing him any favors. So will he be able to select the guy who they find value at 42, or the Texans in for a trade down? Because we know he's willing to go do both. So the question will be, once we get to 42, maybe they now have to be locked in on a corner as defensive tackles come off the board. If Devondre Sweat was a guy some people wanted here, the other thought was now that he got in trouble, that they would remove him from the board, because maybe the Texans were like, look, Joe Mixon, okay. Stephon Diggs, okay, but we're not taking 3 of those guys in one offseason. There are limits to what we will do.
Diggs, diva. Mixon, legit off the field stuff.
Yes, legit. And that has, beyond what he did in college, some tricklings of things that have happened even last offseason.
Right.
So, yes.
There were 2 incidents that involved firearms over a 1-month period. Hopefully, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yes. And to be honest, for the Texans, I know the focus is the draft and getting a corner, but depending on how the draft board plays out, there's a guy like Xavier Howard out there. If they're looking to pay a corner, there's a guy who's had some off the field stuff too. More in the later mixing stuff as opposed to the early mixing stuff that they can look at. So there are corners waiting for the draft to complete, and maybe teams come back to them. But yeah, if you can get a guy on a second round contract that you love, I think I would go there at this point in terms of the corner position, because defensive tackles, they seem to be getting thin at that position.
We have another trade. The Los Angeles Rams have traded into the 7th pick of the second round, just a couple of picks away from the Houston Texans, which we will hopefully be able to announce on the other side. Don't go anywhere. It is ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's coverage of the NFL Draft.
You're listening to ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's 2024 NFL Draft Special. Now back to the Veritex Community Bank Studios with Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
We're just a couple of picks away from the Houston Texans making their first pick, we think, of the 2024 NFL Draft. Technically, on the clock right now, it's the Washington Commanders after the Los Angeles Rams made the 7th pick of the second round. Braden Fisk, a defensive tackle from Florida State. Lots of defensive tackles off the board, 3 wide receivers off the board to open the second round. Those are the only positions that have been drafted. So C.J. Stroud maybe not going to be getting a wide receiver with that second round pick. But, hey, there's still some cornerbacks left on the board. So we got Dell. Joe George is in here now.
Hello.
Full crew is here. All right. We heard from Dell. Joe, what are you looking for the Houston Texans with the pick that's right around the corner, with the knowledge that the only picks that we've seen in the second round thus far are wide receivers and defensive tackles?
Cooper DeJean. Kool-Aid McKinstry would be cool too. I thought listening to Nick Saban yesterday on the broadcast on the ABC one was interesting because it really felt like the way that he was talking about Terrion Arnold and the fact that he didn't transfer from Alabama, like there was like this like subtle shade of like, hey, Kool-Aid's really, he's the dude here. Like he is the cornerback that you all should be talking about and that should be going this high. No disrespect to Arnold, but I like Cooper because Cooper DeJean, what he brings to this team is value and fixes possibly 2 problems in one. Like you have him, he can be a safety, he can be a corner. So like if these high upside guys that you sign in free agency, Okudah and Henderson happen to work out, well then you can use Cooper at the safety spot. So I would like to see Cooper DeJean be the pick here. The Eagles just traded into the 40th pick. I can't imagine that they would go corner, which means the Houston Texans are probably going to be on the clock with Cooper and Kool-Aid McKinstry both there for him.
Well, there you go.
I love Cooper DeJean because of what
he represents,
because of what people put on him.
The hope of white
the
America,
The great white hope.
Well, at least white football America.
Dell, some of us, we never got a shot to play corner. We just got moved to safety immediately.
And that was some of the conversation about him. Of course, that became a thing. That has become a thing already.
With Riley Moss last year as well.
Yes, because it's naturally what everyone defaults to.
Tight hips.
Yeah, of course. He's a general on the field more than an athlete. Of course, I'll ignore his ability to return punts and all the pick sixes, but surely he has to be a safety. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes and will he be the first cornerback taken in the second round. The Kool-Aid McKinstry thing, I like him. He's physical. He doesn't back down. All Alabama corners are a little handsy. That's kind of what they teach, particularly on the college level, where you don't get called for as many interference. And even if you do, it's only 15 yards. So he would have to work on that a little bit.
Get this. Joe, you're going to be shocked. The Eagles traded up for Cooper DeJean. Wow. So the Eagles go cornerback and then cornerback.
Are they going to move him to safety?
They're going to move him to safety.
They have some questions at safety, too. So maybe they think we'll get Quinion Mitchell to be our corner, who a lot of people love, and then they draft their safety.
That's because they had Byard. They traded him. Mm-hmm. Or they acquired Byard, and then he left. He signed with the Bears in the offseason. So they have a gap at safety. So I guess that makes sense. They've invested so much money into offense. Like they've paid Jalen Hurts. They paid Saquon Barkley. In the last week and a half, they've paid Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown again. Yeah. So for the Eagles to be a successful franchise going forward, they have to draft defensive players because all their money is on offense.
Darius Slay, James Bradbury were very good corners for them not that long ago.
Not anymore, though.
And it turned quick.
Yeah, now they're both still on the roster.
I believe so.
So they've drafted a replacement for one. Have they drafted a replacement for both, or will they move Cooper DeJean to safety because that's what you have to do? Because look at him.
Very expensive trades to move up thus far. For the trade up to go and get Cooper DeJean, the Eagles sent Washington pick 50, pick 53, and pick 161. We also saw for the Rams to trade up to number 39 and get Braden Fisk, the defensive tackle from Florida State. LA gave up pick 52, pick 155, and a second-round pick next year. The Rams always just saying F them picks to go get the Florida State defensive tackle. So resetting where we are at right now, the Green Bay Packers are on the clock.
They are not.
They are not. Is there another trade?
There's another trade.
Okay, so let's just go through really quickly all the trades before, Joe, you finish this thought. So thus far, the Chargers have traded up to pick 2. The Falcons have traded up to pick number 3. You've also seen the Rams trade up and the Eagles trade up. Who is trading up to where the Green Bay Packers are with the 9th pick in the 2nd round?
The New Orleans Saints are going to be on the clock here.
Okay.
So all the trades that were predicted in the first round are now just coming in the second.
Yes.
Is it probably because of the run of defensive tackles and wide receivers, and now you mentioned Cooper DeJean going to the Eagles. People are getting more and more aggressive because guys who they thought might be falling are coming off the board. And you think about what's happening if they're a team who's hoping for an offensive lineman, not one has come off the board in the 2nd round. So the board is falling your way, but if you needed defensive help or outside help as far as a weapon is concerned, it's been a struggle. So you might need to get in right now, or any guy you're looking for could be off.
I wonder if the Saints go wide receiver here too, because I mean you have Olave, obviously, but Michael Thomas is gone. Like Adonai Mitchell would make a lot of sense for the New Orleans Saints here. Get some weapons on offense. You're still trying to compete in a division that's about to be run by Michael Penix / Kirk Cousins. Like you need to score with Derek Carr. Yeah, the only thing worse than that pick last night was the Houston traffic getting here today for Dell and I. I would think wide receiver would make sense here, but the New Orleans Saints, that's a tough franchise to read. You have Dennis Allen, who I guess, like they could lean defense here as well, but I just wouldn't be shocked if the Saints go wide receiver.
It would be interesting to see if another wide receiver went off the board to reset what we have seen thus far as selections. To open up the 2nd round, the Bills took a wide receiver. The Chargers took a wide receiver. Falcons defensive tackle. Commanders defensive tackle. Patriots a wide receiver. Titans defensive tackle. Rams a defensive tackle. Then Cooper DeJean, the cornerback for the Eagles. Yeah, so if they go with another wide receiver after that, that would surely be something. I think if you are the Houston Texans, you're hoping that some of these corners, some of these defensive tackles are going to be there. Do you think that the Alabama tie to Kool-Aid means that he is a possibility with this pick number 42?
Well, the thing is, we've heard about that before. Everyone remember that D'Amico didn't actually ever play for Nick, but certainly I'm sure he's got insight into that program. So I wouldn't put it past them. They took Will Anderson last year, so if Nick
Henry To'oTo'o,
so if Nick is giving them word on who you should take as far as Alabama players, and Joe referenced how he talked about Kool-Aid McKinstry in comparison to Terrion Arnold, that you would think that if they were going to take a corner, it would be Kool-Aid.
Well, guess what?
And Joe is shaking his head.
That might be why the Saints traded up, because the Saints trade up with the Green Bay Packers was to get cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry.
So now it's a run on the corners.
It does feel like perhaps the Eagles and Saints sensed that the Houston Texans were looking at a corner with pick number 42, especially considering that yesterday there were rumors that the Texans were going to trade up for pick number, 23?
22, yeah.
With where the Eagles, of course, traded up to go and get Quinion Mitchell. Would be pretty funny in a bad way, I guess, for the Houston Texans if the Eagles twice robbed the Houston Texans, got right in front, cut them in line.
We'll find out what was what after the draft. Those stories start to come out because they always leak about who wanted who and when and why someone made a trade. Let's just hope this Cooper doesn't share the same fate as the last guy named Cooper who went to Philadelphia.
Oh boy!
Good call, Del. Good call.
Do you think?
Good call.
Do you think they bring him in and go, look? Hey man, it was a long time ago. You probably don't know, but at one point we had a guy with the last name Cooper who said something. We're gonna need you to avoid that scenario.
The only reason why I'm not
got a lot on his shoulders already.
I'm just telling him
he can't repair race relations.
I think that's exactly what he's there for.
Yeah.
I mean, do you guys remember like the white versus black draft that Will Compton was talking about and those guys? They said Cooper DeJean when he was still in college was the only hope for cornerback.
And he's the first corner in the 2nd round. So the thing is, if they keep that corner because Darius Slay and Bradbury are on their last legs, he's going to be on the opposite side of another rookie corner. If we don't think Will Compton's going to lock in on the white corner on one side and the black corner on the other, definitely going to happen.
We're going to get to the Houston Texans pick next. They are on the clock. It's ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's coverage of the NFL Draft. It's 7 o'clock, and we know who the newest member of the Houston Texans is. With pick number 42, the Texans selected Georgia cornerback Kamari Lassiter. The run on cornerbacks continues here in the second round. We saw a couple of teams sneak in front of the Houston Texans to draft corners. With pick 40, the Philadelphia Eagles traded up to go get Cooper DeJean from Iowa. The very next pick, the New Orleans Saints traded up to go and get Kool-Aid McKinstry, a corner from Alabama. The Texans end up with the third cornerback taken in the second round. Guys, what do you think about the move?
I would say, first off, it feels like the Texans had their guys snagged from them. We had a conversation about Kool-Aid McKinstry and Nick Saban talking a great deal about him in a positive way. We know they took several Alabama players last year. There's a connection there. And the Saints trade up, and the guy they take is an Alabama corner. It feels like the Texans, even if they like Cooper DeJean, it feels like the Texans had two teams sense what they're after and snake them. And we'll definitely hear that they love Kamari Lassiter, because what else can you say? And if you take him in the second round that high, you do have to like him. But I'm not sure the 6', 187 corner was the one they were after when these two come off the board.
Yeah, and still it falls, true to what Nick Caserio always does. He takes a player from a big time program coming out of Georgia here. So it fits the narrative of what the Houston Texans typically do. And like when we were, kind of going through some of Lance's profile, I'm sure we'll read more of that here in a second. But if he can play man coverage, one of the things that I was looking at this offseason with the acquisitions they made is like maybe they're going to change a little bit. Because like we saw Derek Stingley Jr. have his most success in man last year. And that, to me, this pick with it kind of signals that the Houston Texans defense is going to be more man-focused going forward into the future. This is not one of those guys that, Paul, you and I talked about this earlier today. You expect him to come in day one, make an impact. This is not someone I would have that expectation for, but now you've got a cornerback room with Henderson, Okudah, Lassiter that gives you good competition, and whoever the best man is and wins that second cornerback spot, you would probably feel okay about, regardless of the end result, and then hope that this guy, that Lassiter, develops over time.
Joe referring to two former top 10 picks in Jeff Okudah, former Lion, and CJ Henderson, former Jaguar. Both of those guys have made other pit stops along the way before the Houston Texans signed them this offseason. Let's take a look at Lance Zierlein of our morning show here, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's draft profile. Projected round 3 pick, a little write-up. Spunky but slender with the mentality to sift through the highs and lows that come with the position. Okay, that's good. Means he has a short memory, you would think. Lassiter has the athleticism and dog to play, as Joe said, press man coverage, also all forms of zone. His instincts and play recognition are getting better to help shadow routes and pester catch points, but he hasn't yet flashed as a corner looking to play the football and flip the field. Okay, maybe not a takeaway guy.
I think it had one interception
in 44 games. That has popped up on tape for multiple evaluators. It's not just Lance, so that is something that is standing out, his lack of playmaking.
Okay. He could see flags early in his career as he struggles to keep up with deep throws. He doesn't always trust his technique. Again, per Lance, he's physical and well coached with the potential to play as a nickelback or a roving safety.
So let me ask you a question about the position that they're drafting and the selection and where it is in the draft. Did you expect a day one starter at this spot?
Not at this spot, but between the 3 picks that are going to happen tonight, and you look at the 3 positions that we kind of have identified, our corner, safety, defensive tackle, is you just need to find at least one guy that's going to fill the gap there, especially because you could address it in free agency still. Like you still have Justin Simmons at safety. You still have Quandre Diggs at safety that are available. Steven Nelson is still out there at corner. So even if you don't feel great about this pick right now, like you have options. So as long as you get one guy of the 3 that can make an impact right away, that to me is a win at this point in the draft. Like it would be great. Like Cooper DeJean would have been an awesome pick here because he is a day one starter. Kool-Aid McKinstry, assuming that his Jones fracture will heal, because that's probably why he fell out of the first round. Him and Johnny Newton both. Like he's a day one guy. So I'm fine with the pick. I would have liked someone that is projected by people like Lance to be more of a day one starter, but it is what it is at this point. And when we've talked about a lot, Paul, is I'm going to trust Nick Caserio.
I'm going to trust Nick Caserio as well, but I think at the same time, you certainly can wonder, okay, maybe they should have traded up. Should they have traded up to go and get a corner in the first round? Should they have traded it to go up and get a corner earlier in this round? To what Del was saying a little bit earlier, is this the guy that they wanted? I will say, if it's a Georgia player, I feel pretty good about it. Alabama and Georgia, by default, I'm going to feel pretty good about it. That is not to say that every single player that comes out of those two programs ends up being a success, but at the very least, you have that in your back pocket. On top of that, Cooper DeJean, white guy playing corner. No offense. This is me talking about my people, okay? And on top of that, a guy coming off of a Jones fracture. Some concerns, but this is not the number one corner off the board. If I'm not mistaken, this would be number 6 on the NFL draft thus far.
Yeah, I was looking at Mel Kiper, ESPN's big board. They had him as, at the time when the pick was made, he was the 7th best prospect available. Only Enos Rakestraw, the cornerback from Missouri, was ranked in front of him. So
they could have chosen one slender corner or the other, and they chose Kamari Lassiter. I'm interested to see what they will use him for, particularly because Lance talks about how he's willing to stick his nose in there. But you look at Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry, both either 20 pounds or 20 plus pounds heavier than him. So this is the guy who, if you're going to put in a position to go make plays as a force corner, can he hold up? He's willing, but will he be able, considering the size discrepancy he's going to face?
5'11 and a half, 186 pounds. That is my size.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
pretty much to a T.
Yeah, he's going to need to put some LBs on
Yeah.
in the NFL.
In the NFL.
Yeah,
Okay,
and we'll see if he is actually 186. Is that his playing weight or what he got to
his
for
combine
the combine
yeah.
number? Yeah,
It is his NFL.com weight, so I would assume to what you said, Del, it is probably his combine weight. So the corners that went off the board right in front of him, and you have, first off, Quinion Mitchell from Toledo, who went 22nd. You had Terrion Arnold, who went 24th. The Eagles and Lions making those first 2 picks last night. Mitchell, a corner from Toledo. Arnold, a corner from Alabama. Nate Wiggins, the 30th pick to the Ravens last night. Then tonight, you've seen Cooper DeJean go to the Philadelphia Eagles, the 8th pick of the second round. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the 9th pick of the second round to the New Orleans Saints. Kamari Lassiter goes to the Houston Texans. We just saw another corner go off the board.
4 straight corners.
Max Melton from Rutgers, pick number 11 to the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to go back, though, to the guy that the Houston Texans just selected, Kamari Lassiter, because I saw an interesting comparison. Because it allows us to tell a story, a fun story, a story about dice, a story about Madden. Lance Zierlein's NFL comparison, DeAndre Baker.
Okay.
For DeAndre Baker, first-round pick of the New York Giants in 2019, clipped after being arrested. His first season in the NFL in 2020, ends up going to the Kansas City Chiefs for a couple of seasons.
a Georgia player, by the way.
He is a Georgia player, correct. He now plays for the DC Defenders of the United Football League. For those who don't know about this story, I remember it because I was covering it up in Seattle. The Seahawks got this guy. He and Quinton Dunbar of the Seahawks were arrested for charges of armed robbery and aggravated assault with a firearm.
I remember this.
It was a house party featuring dice and Madden. And they're also featured one of the shadiest lawyers, who is somebody who I guess was once someone who ran for Miami Beach mayor and was
That tracks. Shady in Miami.
and he
Politics.
and he was fired over some sort of fraud. There were duffel bags of money exchanged. I don't know if it involved Baker, Dunbar, but anyway, a fun comparison to Kamari. To Kamari Lassiter.
It's not fun for Kamari.
He did not do any of those things.
It's fun for you. It's not fun for the Texans or Kamari.
Exactly. This is Lance Zierlein is comparing him on the field to DeAndre Baker.
And we see our first offensive lineman go off the board, Jackson Powers Johnson. He was a big hit at the Senior Bowl. Some people thought he could get into the first round. He falls to 44. So the Las Vegas Raiders go get them a center. And I just remember the hype around him. People watched the way he moved. Obviously stout, a big center, almost 6'4", 330 pounds. So that's bigger than we're used to seeing from centers, particularly the guys we see that like the Kelsey types. That is not a Kelsey type. That's a stout dude who should hold up in pass protection and move guys off the ball. And he's quick enough that he won't be a liability, at least the Raiders hope, if they go to some zone type stuff on their offense.
Yeah, interesting too. Like they just announced the pick. They apparently submitted him as a guard. I guess they can do that by choice.
He does have that type of size.
So maybe he'll play guard for the Raiders as well. That's a good pick. The Raiders, we talked about the Bowers thing earlier today. I kind of talked myself back into that being a good idea.
Yeah.
Like you have Bowers, you have Michael Mayer, you have Devontae Adams, you have Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, I guess, is your quarterback. Probably Gardner Minshew. But I actually kind of like what they're doing. They're going to run the ball. Samir White's a good running back. And like now you add a guard/center to this team. They're going to do like the Antonio Pierce, wanted to do some smash mouth football out there.
A little exotic smash mouth football. We're going to go old school Mike Mularkey, huh?
So we have Lance on Twitter talking about Kamari Lassiter.
What does he say?
He says he'll step right in and compete for a spot at nickel. He's not fast, but has really impressive foot quickness and smooth hips to match routes from the slot.
Interesting.
He's wired to be a see-ball, get-ball, run defender, which the Texans covet. And the first response and reply after Lance's tweet is, he's an outside cornerback. So someone who knows nothing probably decided, you know what, NFL.com, Lance Erline, you're wrong.
Interesting.
They have a lot of guys competing
for the nickel.
Right.
So I guess it's like him and Desmond King. Is Desmond King a guy you feel like, Paul, can move outside? Because like he to me was more like
he's at his best in the middle. I think that the thing that he showed last year is that when he is put into that kind of box role, he's very good in run support. He's very good coming off of the edge and blitzing and things like that. So yeah, I don't know.
Where you position Miles Bryant? You've seen him quite a bit.
He is also, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah.
He's a special team guy or he is a nickel corner. So it's really interesting to see the route that they're going because they're stacking up on those nickel guys. Do they really feel like
think
Okudah or Henderson can do this?
Yeah, that we know.
Maybe they believe in those guys.
And, you know, D'Amico's asked about it, certainly because we're talking about guys who have, well, to be honest, washed out in other places.
Yeah.
And he talks about their ability. He talks about what they could be as opposed to what they have been, because if they had done anything, they wouldn't be available. So do they actually believe in the Okudah or Johnson or or Henderson, or do they know that there is a more highly priced cornerback that they have their eyes on that is willing to come in June or whenever they make a decision? Because right now, if Lassiter is a nickel and he's going to fight for that spot, which also is a bit concerning that he not even locked into a starting spot at the nickel, something he'll have to compete for, which is okay. That's what you do. You let guys compete. I still have my concerns if the outside position is the one still being manned by Henderson and Okudah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, you take a look at the depth chart, and again, it's ESPN's. How much stock do you put into it? But right now, they have Okudah lined up as the starting left corner opposite Derek Stingley Jr. I imagine a selection of a cornerback means that there's no return for Steven Nelson, who is still a free agent.
You'd think so.
Right. I mean, well, think about just the amount of acquisitions that they have made this offseason. It's not just Okudah and Henderson. And again, some of these guys are probably a strong word, could be cut in training camp, the final roster cut down. But they added Miles Bryant, they added Mike Ford, and they brought back Desmond King, in addition to bringing in Jeff Okudah and C.J. Henderson. And now they draft a corner in Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia. It is a very crowded room right now.
Yeah, one thing we talked about too before is the idea of maybe like this is the part of the safety solution as well. Like, could Henderson or Okudah, like, could they be transitional guys? A couple local guys coming off the board here. Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker from Texas A&M, just went to the Green Bay Packers. And well, if Jerry Jones's goal was to draft Jonathan Brooks in the NFL draft, that's not happening because he is going to be part of the new look Carolina Panthers this year. You
think David Tepper was thinking to himself, you know what? I'm going to outdo Jerry Jones, okay? In terms of making an ass, which he did on Thursday night, of course, because remember, if you don't know, David Tepper, owner of the Carolina Panthers, saw a restaurant that had a sign that said, hey, let the head coach and the general manager make the pick. He went inside, he removed the host's hat, and seemed to reprimand him before shaking his hand and leaving. We didn't get to hear the audio of that, so that happened.
I need the audio.
But a little bit later, in a post-first round of the draft press conference with the Dallas Cowboys, we saw Jerry Jones, owner of the Cowboys, say, "Yeah, we want Jonathan Brooks."
Yeah, well, Jerry, we know it's either Big 12 or SEC, and most importantly, if it's an Arkansas guy, forget about it. If they're in a spot where he can take them, more from Lance on Kamari Lassiter, as you know, he's going to be answering questions for people who want to know. He ran a 6.464. Lance had him as a second round pick before. He saw that speed. That's why he dropped him to the third. Certainly, if he's on the outside, it's concerning, but he also goes on to say his short area testing helped convince Lance that he could get the job done as a nickel inside because they need to match quickness and be with slot targets, and he believes he can step up to the challenge as a run defender when needed. So, overly, I guess you could say certainly a positive review from Lance. I'm sure he's not going to put a guy in the third, even the third round, if he thinks he's not good. But the speed is the one thing you might have to worry about. So guys are going to be able to run away from him. That's why you put him on the inside to help him out on that. So the Texans, at least according to Lance, took a third round and a second. Does that mean they were just afraid of what the draft board looked like at corner? Maybe. And we won't ever know who they really wanted because Kamari was their guy. He was the top of the board. Yeah. We really wanted him.
They'll say that.
Yeah, until
Aaron, you believe it.
Until Aaron Wilson investigates. Then we'll
yeah,
really
it was
find out.
like we just saw something like that today. I think it was Ari Marov or whatever it is. He reported that the New York Giants offered the 6th pick in their first rounder in 2025 to the New England Patriots for the 3rd pick so they could take Drake May. And the Patriots said, nope.
No, not going to do it. One other thing that Lance highlighted, absolutely belligerent at the catch point.
Yes. So
describing Kamari Lassiter's scouting.
So he will fight. He just didn't make a lot of plays on the ball as far as interceptions are concerned. He's not a takeaway guy. You have that on the other side in Stingley, or at least on the outside in Stingley. But he will be a guy who competes at the catch point to get deflections and pass breakups. So you like that, and we'll see if his quickness is good enough to match the NFL slots. You think about the AFC South before we go to break. As far as guys taken, well, now I'm forgetting who the Jags took in the first round. Brian Thomas. Thomas. So Kamari Lassiter has seen enough of Brian Thomas, at least just because they're both in the SEC. They probably won't see a lot of each other unless they move Brian Thomas to be a power slot. He feels like more of an outside guy. So I guess the question will be, can Kamari Lassiter cover Christian Kirk? Because that's the guy he'll have to see.
Kamari Lassiter, cornerback out of Georgia, is the Houston Texans' first pick of the 2024 NFL Draft at pick number 42. Our coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft here on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 continues after this.
You're listening to ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's 2024 NFL Draft Special. Now back to the Veritex Community Bank Studios with Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
Well, we're learning new things about the newest member of the Houston Texans because, guys, they drafted somebody who's given himself a nickname.
I mean, not just a nickname, Paul. Click on the picture. What do you see? You see a giant chain with a lock on it. Because he calls himself the Locksmith.
Yes.
I don't like it.
Kamari Lassiter, 42nd pick of the 2024 NFL Draft, a Georgia guy, I guess goes by Mari and calls himself the Locksmith. The conference call that I guess he is currently doing with Houston Texans reporters and media shows him on some sort of webcam wearing a chain that has a lock, and on top of that with a key underneath said lock, and it looks like his initials are on said lock.
All right.
So he's all in on the Locksmith nickname.
He's very all in.
You've got to have a brand.
To be fair,
You gotta be real
it fits
good.
right in with the Texans. If Cal can put on a chain with a giant H,
That's a good point.
why can't their first pick of the draft have a giant Locksmith chain?
That's a good point, though.
It's the branding the Texans are down with. You know what's going to happen. Those two are going to take a picture together. Cal's going to be repping his chain. Kamari will be repping his. I imagine it's the first thing we see at a press conference.
Oh, definitely.
I don't know if Cal shows up for second round picks. He may be too big for that now. But if he does, that chain at some point will be on him, and they will take a picture with their chains on.
It's all about the brand in 2024, guys. Everybody can be a social media star.
Will you wear the Locksmith T-shirt? Is it the Locksmith or Locksmith?
He just said Locksmith.
Locksmith. So will you wear a Locksmith T-shirt if he's a good player?
No.
Yes.
No.
He is a locksmith. Is he the locksmith?
I mean, look, he gave up 136 passing yards last year.
Well,
That's not a lot.
That's because all the quarterbacks are running in fear because of the Georgia second
They're not going
front
to
line.
They're not going to be running in fear of the Texans this year.
I'm going to say the talent disparity between Vanderbilt and Georgia is a bit greater than even the AFC South and the Texans.
That's a good point.
You know, a lock is supposed to prevent everything from getting through. So, I don't know.
So his lock has been picked a couple times.
His lock is pickable.
Yes.
It's not a perfect lock.
Unlike Kamari, who never picks off passes.
That is
one.
also true. He only has one.
I do feel like, I mean, you can lock guys down, and that's how I guess you can
That's
give
true.
yourself the nickname. But
That's true.
let's get some. We'll need some interceptions.
Yes.
on him,
Hey,
too.
let's make some plays.
But look, and he's going to be an important person because we saw last year with Steven Nelson out there. Like, as soon as when Derek Stingley Jr. really started to come on, they stopped throwing at him. Like he shut down half the side of the field. So whoever's on the other half of the field, it's important. And we saw D'Amico Ryans very rarely ever travel Derek Stingley Jr. He was on one side at all times. So whether he's in the nickel spot or he's on the outside, like this is going to be an important person that you need for your defense. I'm trying to see here because he also in his press conference here in his meeting with the media, he brought up the fact that CJ Stroud gave them hell in 2022. The game that made CJ Stroud.
Yes.
He would have been on the field for.
Oh, boy. So did C.J. Stroud bully his newest teammate, Mari Lassiter? That's a good question.
Is that his real name?
It seems
Kamari.
like he likes to go by Mari based off of some of the reporting of the teleconference that he is doing with members of Houston media. Some other highlights there. Said he played nickel through college, believes he can do it at a very high level. So did that person responding to LZ, Lance Zierlein, saying that he's an outside corner. You're full of ploop. Also from Mari Lassiter, he says he is a man who hates losing more than he loves winning.
That's good. He's going to do a lot of winning here, we hope.
We hope.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised. Like, a player is always going to talk to you about, it's kind of like we were talking about how they're going to say this is the guy they wanted. Of course, he said that he wanted to play for Houston because it's a young team. But it is, if you're a young player, this is a prime destination spot. So I like the pick. We'll see how it develops. I like the position that they chose. To me, like that was what was important today was was finding guys that filled your needs, and you hope that he's one of them.
Okay.
And we heard Nick Casario in a clip before the draft talk about how hard it was. I mean, not for a second round pick. Second round pick will have a roster spot, but he talked about how it's going to be hard to make this team because they feel like they filled quite a bit of their holes. And if we're talking about places where maybe they didn't, certainly corner was one. Now they added bodies, so Lassiter will have to compete, but his draft status, the lack of a cemented guy in that position probably states he's going to get every opportunity to win that job. And if they go with the route of competition makes everyone better, I guess we're better off if he doesn't win it if there's another guy who's better. But I would hope with your first pick of the draft, he's good enough to beat out the likes of a Desmond King or a Miles Bryant or whoever it might be.
More from the locksmith, Mari Lassiter. He says it's surreal getting drafted to play in Houston and that he always wanted to go to the Houston Texans.
All right.
So Kamari has had some media training.
I like that. Listen, to build a brand, media training, good. Cool nickname, good.
Will there be Locksmith shirts in Houston Texans colors by the end of the weekend?
I mean, there better be.
You got to earn them first. You can call yourself your own nickname, but to get like a T-shirt and a team store. You don't think he already
has, not by the Texans, himself, with his own logo?
Oh, yeah, I could see
Will
that.
he already have those ready to go?
Yeah. I'm bummed about this next pick. Chris Jenkins just got drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals at 49. I thought that was a player that I was hoping he was going to be there for the Houston Texans in about, 10 picks now?
Correct.
I guess is when they're back on the clock. So that's someone that I was hoping for. That makes sense for the Bengals. Like they needed. They lost DJ Reader, so I'm not surprised to see them go in this direction. But now Washington's up on the clock again with the 50th pick. So defensive tackle or safety probably is what you're looking at next. Safety, there's only been one taken. Tyler Newman was taken by the Giants. There has been another run on defensive tackle, and I feel like safety is what we're seeing next.
Okay, let's reset everything that's been happening in the NFL draft because we have been focusing on the most recent selection of the Houston Texans. That is Kamari Lassiter, a cornerback out of Georgia. After him, another cornerback, Max Melton from Rutgers, went to the Cardinals. The Raiders drafted offensive lineman Jackson Powers-Johnson, a center from Oregon. If you are an Aggies fan, whoop! Edgerrin Cooper, a linebacker, he goes to the Green Bay Packers with pick 45. The Panthers at pick 46 took Texas running back Jonathan Brooks. Hook 'em indeed. New York Giants took Tyler Newman, who Joe just mentioned a moment ago, a safety out of Minnesota with the 47th pick. The Jaguars, they draft a defensive tackle out of LSU, Mason Smith. And as you just heard from Joe, Chris Jenkins off the board, the defensive tackle from Michigan. Right now, you take a look at the picks until the Houston Texans are back on the clock with pick number 59. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 picks away from the Texans being back on the clock.
Well, an interesting thing, because Lance Zierlein had Mike Sainers still as his selection for the Texans. He goes off the board to the Commanders. So I don't know if it's a much like the Stingley Gardner thing that happened a couple years ago, where some people saw Gardner go off the board, then we saw Stingley struggle. I imagine Lance will be focused on this one. This is the guy he had for the Texans. Sainers still good production, six interceptions in 2023. Was a former wide receiver. They moved them over, and he made the change effortlessly. So he's a big time athlete. He's part of that Michigan defense who was a lockdown and went on to win a national title. So we saw 2 Michigan players go off the board in the next couple in back-to-back picks, and now you have another corner who will probably be a nickel type. So we'll see if we're comparing second-round picks. Did the Commanders get it right, or did the Texans? And the Texans certainly will hope Kamari Lassiter lives up to the draft billing.
Indianapolis Colts are on the clock. Our coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft here on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 continues after this.
You're listening to ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's 2024 NFL Draft Special. Now back to the Veritex Community Bank Studios with Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
Still waiting for pick number 2 for the Houston Texans in the second round of the 2024 NFL Draft. For those who were not with us a little bit ago, the Houston Texans selected, as he is calling himself, Mari Lassiter, a cornerback out of Georgia, with pick number 42. We're still waiting to see when the Houston Texans will be on the clock as I untangle my headphones and try not to strangle them and murder them dead.
While you do that, and a surprise to no one, the Steelers have taken another offensive lineman. So they go back-to-back offensive lineman, first-round pick, and now their second-round pick, Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. The Steelers were a team who may have snaked a tackle from the Dolphins. The Dolphins went ahead and took Chop Robinson. So and I bring that up because it is something that occurs quite a bit in the draft, and I think the Texans probably suffered from it with their first pick of this draft, with the corners going ahead of Kamari Lassiter. I don't know if I'm ever going to call him the locksmith. It feels like if I ever do, it's because he's not locking anyone down. I'm never going to do it because
it's going to be
great.
ironic.
Yeah, it's going to be ironic, I feel like, if I ever do it.
We have had corners with unfortunate nicknames before here in Houston. Del, I'm sure you're familiar with one because he is a University of Miami graduate and a former second-round pick, Brandon No-Fly Zone Harris, infamous for doing a dance of an incomplete pass motion that referees would make, often followed by a flag in his general direction from referees, about as effective of a no-fly zone as the ones that were over Afghanistan and Iraq.
I remember Brandon Harris as small and kind of slow, so that's not a great combination when you want to be an NFL corner.
Generally, you would like to be better.
A couple more things here about Lassiter, just some info.
Some more nuggets?
Yeah, Patrick Storm here just tweeted this out, who's a great guy who covers the Texans. Lassiter never allowed more than 2 receptions in a game. Like, now part of that's the Georgia thing we talked about earlier. They're getting after the quarterback so well. Pro Football Focus, their college branch, had him graded as the 6th best cornerback in the SEC. We saw, 2 other ones in front of him drafted already. So, when you look at the grades and you look at everything so far, it makes sense. And Adonai Mitchell, who is another Texas player, is now officially off the board, and he is in the division. He will be a new target of Anthony Richardson. So, Locksmith, meet Mr. Mitchell. This might be your responsibility going forward.
Okay.
That's a good pick for the Colts. I can't believe he fell that far. What's this diabetes story for people that haven't heard it, though?
There was a story about him where a reporter was told by a scout that A.D. Mitchell has diabetes and it affects the way he acts. And because he doesn't handle it well, there are times and interactions with people where he's not the most polite, and the reporter was blaming it, or at least the scout was blaming it, on his diabetes. It became a reason why people didn't like him, and partly we were blaming Mitchell for not handling his diabetes well enough, and it turning into something where his attitude became an issue. I don't know if he's uncoachable because of that, but that was some of the terminology used. He's uncoachable because of his diabetes and what it means. And he says it's the lamest bleep ever.
I kind of agree. That's a very interesting assessment.
Dude, that's a tough thing to be putting on a player. Be like, hey, he has diabetes, so he's not coachable.
Abrasive and rude because of his diabetes.
I mean, I'm abrasive and rude when I don't have any
food, when I'm hungry.
Hangry.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Rappaport did just tweet, he said at number 52, the Colts take Texas wide receiver A.D. Mitchell, a rough process for him, but a very talented player. So this definitely feels like a player that fell in the draft because of whatever, if it's this stuff or other, he did not handle well.
Is that a Bob McGinn special? Bob McGinn, a guy who I believe used to cover the Packers, I'm guessing, for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Sounds right.
He has drifted over to the Go Long website that features our friend Tyler Dunn, who we talked to about Stephon Diggs. And the thing that we know about Bob McGinn, if you're looking for salacious pre-draft details about specific players that may be being leaked as a way to make guys fall in the draft, a la, the CJ Stroud S2 stuff. McGinn's going to deliver. So I'm wondering, is this he's angry when his diabetes is acting up story came from him?
Amazingly accurate. It did come from Bob.
Of course it did.
2 scouts revealed that Mitchell is a boomer bust guy, which is par for the course. That's not crazy to talk about in the draft. But he was abrasive and struggled to pay attention due to his battle with type 1 diabetes. The first source went as far as to say Mitchell can be almost uncoachable. Wow. Let me ask you this, because Mitchell became a topic of conversation throughout the draft process for myself and Sean, mostly because he's a Texas guy, and I find things said about him funny, and I wanted to make Sean upset. So it was 80 Mitchell uncoachable and abrasive because of his diabetes, and also one online evaluator said that he has he catches the ball like he has tennis rackets for hands.
Oh. Well,
that's tough.
Generally, you'd like to not do that.
No.
Usually, you want to use your fingers, and that implies that his fingers are stone-esque.
He tried. He just caught it like his fingers were tennis rackets.
How do you do that? I'm trying to.
I think that's the point.
Logistically do that.
It's always a difficult process. So, at least at times it was, according to the scout or reporter.
At least that's consistent with the last play that we saw from the Indianapolis Colts offensively in 2024, early on in that showdown with the Texans on Saturday, because the last time we saw the Colts throw a pass to somebody who was supposed to catch the football, it was their third-string running back, and it bounced off his hands.
So the Texans are about 6 picks away. The Commanders are on the clock right now. They are taking Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State. So if you're looking at safety, there's still plenty of options. Javon Bullard, the Locksmith teammate from Georgia, is available. Lance Zierlein, in his mock draft that he put out last night, has them taking Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. So it still feels like that's where we're headed right now. Any surprises from either of you guys that we haven't seen the very often trade-happy Nick Caserio not make a big move yet?
Well,
yes. Considering how the board played out, he might be regretting that he didn't make a trade, but because of the expected aggressiveness and the rumors of him trying to get into the bottom of the first round, the fact that the board fell the way it did without him making a trade is probably the biggest surprise as far as Texans-related stuff so far.
He clearly is someone who's willing to walk away from the table. He is not somebody that is going to continue to push to get what he wants. And you might like that. You might hate that. I tend to like that he is not going above and beyond to make sure that he trades up far enough to get a player, because sometimes you have to give up a lot of draft capital. And at the same time, though, if you're a team that does not have a number 2 corner right now, and your number 1 corner is somewhat injury prone in Derek Stingley Jr., it would be nice to have a more traditional outside cornerback as opposed to yet another nickel corner, at least based off of what we're seeing about him, all these scouting reports, because they do have Desmond King and they do have Miles Bryant.
Yeah, it's funny because we hear all the time about how many corners you need to be successful. You can't have enough of them. But the thought of, particularly because you didn't have a first rounder, the thought of your first pick of the draft being a nickel corner who will have to compete for the job, it rings a little hollow as far as in terms of excitement, and it's been all about excitement as far as the Texans have concerned. And of course, if Kamari Lassiter is great, if you were a little disappointed, it's not going to matter. But yeah, as far as draft night reactions, it's like, oh, okay, you took a nickel corner, okay, great, I guess, sure.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where the Texans are right now, just as a team. It's like because they added Diggs in the offseason, like you're not talking about adding a wide receiver. They're probably not taking a running back until the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, maybe even you don't expect anything flashy. I mean, if they took Trey Benson here, the running back from Florida State, in the next 6 picks, sure. I'd be fine if the Houston Texans did that, but they're just not in flashy build mode at this point. So the Texans are not going to be out there having sexy picks, as people would say.
No sexy picks?
No, probably not.
Well, that's unfortunate. But hey, as long as they don't take a wide receiver, I'm happy. That's really all I'm looking at right now.
I'm still kind of just hoping that they take a wide receiver because I want to see you be upset.
You just want me to be annoyed.
Yeah.
You just want me to be mad. Everyone just you know what? I'm just.
What is your?
Just a little monkey. Everyone wants me to get mad all the time.
What is your feeling about why you don't want a wide receiver.
Because they have enough. They had enough already. I don't understand why they needed to trade for Stephon Diggs, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I get it. Okay, cool. Like, hey, you have a ton of weapons right now. You theoretically have an offense that's capable of going shootout mode against teams like the Chiefs, against the Bengals, now that you had a third wide receiver. But I felt like if Tank Dell was healthy, and maybe that's the big if that the Texans aren't 100% sure about going forward, I felt like they have a pretty damn good receiver core and group of weapons for C.J. Stroud to work with. And I'm also expecting C.J. Stroud to elevate the play of all the guys around him. So, hey, look, they got Stephon Diggs. A lot of people are happy about it. And I'm not upset about it by any means. I'm just thinking to myself, you need a lot on this team still. And is Stephon Diggs the cherry on top of a Super Bowl caliber team? I don't think they're that close, you know? I think that defensively, they're going to need to make some stops with the run game. The defense did not look great against the ground in that game against the Colts towards the end. And, of course, there were some moments over the course of last year where they struggled against some of the worst quarterbacks in the league who randomly had field days against them.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, too, with the wide receiver spot. I mean, if they do take one, it's because they're looking to the future of all these guys being free agents next offseason. But even at this point, like, they've missed the boat. So that's why there's clearly no. You have Troy Franklin, who's out there, the wide receiver from Oregon. You have the other wide receiver from Washington, Jalen McMillan. And then you have Brendan Rice and Roman Wilson, who are probably the next, like, those are ESPN's third and fourth guys. Brendan Rice, like, I was just curious. I was asking Lance about him. Obviously, being Jerry Rice's kid, like, you wonder if he is this great prospect. Lance did not speak very highly of him. Roman Wilson would make a lot of sense out of the slot for the Houston Texans, but I can't imagine a world in which they look at their needs and they say wide receiver is one of them. Running back, I'm fine with.
And considering where we are in the draft as far as best available, you can look at ESPN or NFL.com and matching it with position of need. It's a little rough unless you think a safety is where they need to go, because if you look at it, a lot of linebacker and cornerback types on the board, and offensive tackle on Blake Fisher, and edge and Chris Braswell. So, and then what you mentioned, Trey Benson as a running back. Maybe you don't want to use your second round pick on a running back. So if I'm thinking fill the need, and I kind of agree with Paul when it comes to how close they actually are. I thought this draft would be very important in that process of trying to get them closer. If you can get a starter at safety or a guy who gets into your rotation early and maybe beats out Jimmy Ward, and Jimmy Ward just becomes the veteran mentor, I would go there. And if they believe Javon Bullard is that type, I'm in on that, because I think that's a bigger problem right now for me than anything else right now, as far as guys that match up with the draft board.
The Texans have the 59th pick of the 2024 NFL Draft. Right now, we are at pick 54, the 22nd pick of the second round. The Cleveland Browns making a pick. The Miami Dolphins on the clock. We'll continue our coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft after this.
ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's NFL Draft Special continues. From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
All right. One pick in the books for the Houston Texans thus far. Second round of the 2024 NFL Draft. Pick number 42. They took Georgia cornerback Kamari Lassiter. Still waiting for them to make their next pick. Ahead of them in the queue, the Miami Dolphins, who just made their pick, the Dallas Cowboys, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Green Bay Packers. We're talking about some of the wide receivers that went off the board. Adonai Mitchell going to the Indianapolis Colts. Also, Mason Smith, the Jacksonville Jaguars in the AFC South. They took a defensive tackle out of LSU. And earlier in the second round, we saw the Tennessee Titans take out of Texas defensive tackle Tavondre Sweat. So we're thinking at this moment in time, defensive tackle, if there's any left, doesn't seem like as many were available as the draft began, the second round of the draft began. And of course, safety as well. Dell just said, wow.
I'm only responding because we had this guy on the John Lance show. Houston's Patrick Paul gets drafted in the second round by the Miami Dolphins.
There we go.
And
not as high as he told everyone he was going.
No,
but
and higher than his draft grade would suggest. So if we're talking about a potential reach, this is one that people are going to discuss. But Houston's own Patrick Paul, drafted in the second round by the Dolphins at tackle.
Allowed only 2 sacks and over 1,000 pass blocking plays since 2022.
All right.
And this is probably a pick for the future because how long with Teron Armstead, who's consistently injured, going to last? There's talk that he might retire this season or this offseason. So this is a potential guy, now that they locked up Austin Jackson at right tackle, that may get a redshirt year. And then he can watch Teron Armstead, who, when he's on the field, is very, very capable and certainly a Pro Bowler when he plays. He can watch him for a year and then maybe take over that spot.
Is this the guy who yacked?
No, that's Ruben. That was the intern.
That's the other guy.
Okay,
yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Listen, just wondering how friendly, because we seem to be friendly with Cougars offensive linemen. Wasn't 100%
No,
sure on that
he's going into portals and out of portals and back into portals right now. He's not NFL in the NFL draft.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Dallas Cowboys now on the clock. We had mentioned that there are probably some safety options for the Houston Texans here. As far as the defensive tackles, there was a run on defensive tackles, a position we'd like to see the Houston Texans get in the beginning of the second round. Third pick of the second round, Ruke Orororo went to the Atlanta Falcons. He's a defensive tackle out of Clemson. Jerzon Newton, defensive tackle from Illinois, went to the Commanders. I mentioned Tavondre Sweat from Texas a moment ago, going to Tennessee. Braden Fisk, the Rams trading up a lot of picks to go get him out of Florida State. A bit of a quiet moment for the defensive tackle side of things in the second round until the Jaguars took Mason Smith from LSU. Chris Jenkins went to the Cincinnati Bengals, and now Michael Hall Jr., the most recent defensive tackle off the board, going to the Cleveland Browns, the Ohio State defensive tackle.
Yeah, 13 defensive backs and defensive tackles combined taken so far in the second round. So this is the run. Like we saw what happened yesterday in the first round of the NFL draft. All the quarterbacks, wide receivers, tackles, edge rushers, like that was pretty much 80% of the picks, 90% of the picks in the first round yesterday. So you're seeing all these other positions go off quickly. It does make you wonder about just, where the Texans could be, what they could have wanted. I don't know if, I'm glad they have Stephon Diggs. I am. I do look at the way the draft fell and where they're at now and wonder if they would have been better off originally just staying at 23 and not making that move with the Minnesota Vikings when they did. I know they used that second rounder from 2025 from the Vikings to get Stephon Diggs. But just the way it's gone, it does make you wonder a little bit if Nick Caserio could have had a better draft just doing that. But we'll see how it plays out. You never know.
Lottery ticket or Stephon Diggs? It's really a question of, do you think you would get more with that lottery ticket than you would with Stephon Diggs? Clearly, they are turning that cornerback room into some sort of Thunderdome where these guys are all going to have to compete with one another for playing time in addition to just a roster spot.
A Thunderdome of mid. Hey, all of you guys, come out here. We'll see how it goes. We're not sure what comes out of it, but let's see. Let's see how this plays out. I hope this is one of those things where competition breeds the best player, and then you put them all in there. You see who comes out, and you, under D'Amico, you all of a sudden have a really good player. I don't think the ingredients are great going in. We'll see what happens when they come out.
A Thunderdome of mid. Some would argue that of all of the Mad Max franchise movies, that Thunderdome was the most mid of all of them. I'm definitely most preferential to number 2,
Okay.
The Road Warrior. Just walk away.
Are you ready for the new one?
I am very ready for the new one.
It looks interesting.
Anna Joy Taylor.
It does look pretty good.
She is a strong, powerful woman and is playing a strong, powerful woman.
And that's what you support the most.
That was played by Charlize Theron in the first one. It's a spinoff, right? This is like her backstory before she
the
decided
origin
to go,
story.
cut off all her hair and got one of her arms chopped off or something like that. Yeah, anyway, to bring it back to the 2024 NFL draft.
The Dallas Cowboys are on the clock.
Dallas Cowboys are on the clock. Okay, so who do you think the Dallas Cowboys are going to go after here? I imagine Jerry Jones, perhaps a sad little panda, because Jonathan Brooks, the running back that he had hinted that he wanted them to get, the running back out of Texas, he is off the board. Are the Cowboys going to get their, I don't know, linebacker, a running back? Are they going to get an offensive lineman? Are they going to go all in here? What's up next?
It would be different than anything they've done this offseason, despite the proclamations of what they're doing. The fans aren't happy. They trade back in the first round. All of it suggests that are we trying to compete for a title, or are we taking a different view of what our team is? And certainly they have talent on offense side of ball. Got some great defensive players as well, but it hasn't been the offseason Cowboy fans or anybody surrounding them really expected.
Yeah, and I would not define this as an all-in move. They are taking Western Michigan defensive end Marshawn Nealand. Look, DeMarcus Lawrence is on the last year of his contract, so you're getting a pass rusher to replace a pass rusher at this point, but that might be a good decision for the Cowboys. Like this, they actually feel like they're operating for the first time, maybe just like out of the control of Jerry Jones, like maybe someone more wise to the football operations. It's like, hey, Jerry, you were the one running this, and Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons are all free agents at the same time.
I don't know. I felt that Stephen Jones is running the show for the last couple of years, and that Jerry is just vocal and doesn't stop talking, and sometimes his mouth gets in the way of, the fog of war.
Yeah.
Trying to hide their big board from other teams across the league. But hey, they're in a very difficult spot right now. At the crossroads, I think some would say. Will they miss their Uncle Charles at the end of the year? I suppose we'll find out. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the clock right now. After that, it's the Green Bay Packers making a selection. And then it's the Houston Texans, assuming they do not trade back with the 59th pick. We're going to step aside until we get to that pick in the next couple of picks. It is ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft. The Houston Texans are on the clock. Pick 59 of the 2024 NFL Draft. We'll see if they make a pick. The first pick that they made in tonight's draft with pick 42 was Georgia cornerback Kamari Lassiter, who goes by Mari and has the nickname the Locksmith.
Given to him by himself.
Correct.
That is an important factor.
Yeah, because it's not like
self-appointed.
Yeah,
nickname.
like Tank Dell didn't start calling himself Tank.
No.
His mother named him Tank.
Because he had a big head, right?
Yes. University of Georgia, their football program, tweeted out this video of Javon Bullard, their safety, reacting to Kamari getting drafted. He was jacked, and he was potentially one pick away from being a Houston Texan. But he will not be. He is going to be a Green Bay Packer instead. So I wanted Javon Bullard there. Thought it would make some sense.
We talked about him.
But they miss out once again. So, I mean, Nick Casario probably knows what he's doing better than me for the record. So I'm not gonna be one of those people online, Paul, that you love.
You kind of are being that person on the radio instead.
No, I'm just saying. I trust Nick Casario. He can take another position here. He can take a running back if he wants, or a safety. Just not a wide receiver and not a quarterback.
There does seem to be a bit of sadness on Texans Twitter right now that Bullard went off the board.
It felt like the guy in the position most needed, and now maybe at least Texan Twitter, I don't know about Nick Casario, they're left scrambling trying to figure out who they can reconcile being happy about. Because, at some point you start to look at guys who are coming off the board and go, okay, Bullard's the guy. We want him. Now he's not your guy. So who's next? Who will they convince themselves is great, or who will they convince themselves is terrible? And we'll see who the Texans take.
Yeah, if you look at the best available, at least this one's ESPN right now, their number one player is Enos Rakestraw Jr., the cornerback out of Mizzou. Can't imagine the Texans would do that. Junior Colston, the linebacker from Michigan, another cornerback, TJ Tampa from Iowa State, Peyton Wilson, North Carolina State linebacker, and then Cedric Gray, North Carolina linebacker. So at least, if you look at the top 5 guys, according to ESPN, it's 3 linebackers and 2 corners. So on paper, when you look at it, yeah, they're probably going to be reaching in theory here a little bit, but this is one of those spots in the draft where the names start to fall off, and that's why I think most people are probably upset about Bullard, because it's one of the names, and that's why people don't like the fact that the pick is gone.
Gotcha.
That the player's gone. That's at least when you get to the second, third, and fourth round, I think most of the time, if you're not upset with the position being taken, it's because it's a somewhat common name for fans from college football. Like, they know that name, and because they have that association with a player, that's where they're often frustrated. I would have liked Bullard, the fit on this team, but you don't even know if the Texans are going to take a safety. Their actions with keeping Petrie and Ward might be where we're all off on that.
I'm looking at the NFL draft tracker right now. 3 picks are currently in. So things are somewhat moving along, but right now the announcement that we are seeing on the TV is the Buccaneers, who just took Alabama edge rusher Chris Braswell. The Packers pick is in, the Texans pick is in. So we'll see what they decided to do, Nick Casario, D'Amico Ryans and company, in just a second.
Let me ask you a question about how you attack the draft depending on where your team is. Are you guys at a point where you believe the Texans can take potential over a guy who can be a plug and play? Let's say they believe a guy, after being molded by their developmental team, can be a player in 2 years, but he's not ready to be a player today on a team some people think can be a title contender. Would you be in favor of them drafting for potential, or do you think they need to go draft a guy who they expect to play immediately? Because Casario's talking like this roster is strong enough where they don't need an immediate fit anywhere.
Yeah, they're talking. You're like, when you just with Lassiter, that pick is a great example of this. Really, is where that's probably more of a developmental pick because of everything you already have on your roster. Paul, you said 8 corners. Mm-hmm. So what's the value of drafting a corner there? Even though long term it is a need. That's even where the wide receiver position comes back into the conversation a little bit, just because of how many guys are free agents at the end of this upcoming season. I would say normally, you want to get guys that can impact right away, but if you want to take the developmental process, that's fine too.
That goes back to, though, earlier conversation that we had. Okay, if they got a corner that's more of a developmental guy at this moment in the draft, is that what they optimally wanted? Did they want somebody else?
You think you might find a starter at that spot, and you take a guy who you're going to tell us is going to compete with veterans that you sign at the position. From what Nick Caserio said, it felt like he thought this team was kind of built and ready, and maybe an immediate starter wouldn't be in the cards. Do we believe they're in a position where they can just roll out there right now? Because he said we can roll out right now and play, and we'll be great.
Well, they just drafted somebody that I don't imagine will be playing a whole lot in 2024, at least if one player who has changed his Twitter profile has his way, because the Texans have selected Notre Dame offensive tackle Blake Fischer with the 59th pick of the 2024 NFL draft. You got Laramie Tunsil as your left tackle, one of the best in the game. You have Titus Howard,
who you paid,
and who changed his Twitter profile to say tackle only this offseason after playing a lot of guard last year.
Does he know that? Does he know? Do the Texans know he's just a tackle?
I wonder about that. Dell, Blake Fischer, a tackle. So theoretically, two players that you are drafting to develop and hopefully have someday be starters.
But when is Blake Fischer going to start with Titus Howard being paid and tackle only? Do we know if Blake Fischer has any versatility to play anywhere else? Because it sounds like you're drafted a swing tackle for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I mentioned Patrick Paul going to Miami because the thought is Teron Armstead's not long for that job and he might retire. So this year would be a redshirt year. Tunsil and Howard aren't in a position where they're going to be retiring after the 2024 season.
No, but when you look at where the Texans are going forward with cap space and some of the decisions they made, I don't think it's crazy to think that they just drafted Titus Howard's replacement. That maybe Titus Howard,
they're not happy
that has been a right tackle, a left guard for this team, has underperformed very poorly when he's been forced to play left guard, because he's not a guard. He's clearly a tackle. Like, he's right about what he put in his Twitter profile, but they gave him a good contract. He's not healthy very often. If you're talking about the conversation we were just having about the now versus the long term, that's where you look at your long term probably, is your right tackle. And Laramie Tunsil, he's not exactly a spring chicken. Like, he's not the youngest guy in the NFL. He's now the second highest paid left tackle in the NFL. But drafting offensive line here surprises me. I would think that this means he's got some shot to play left guard, though.
He is somebody that has played pretty much all right tackle since starting as a freshman at left tackle. So he hasn't played another position to this point. I suppose the Texans always look at a guy and wonder about the versatility of them as an offensive lineman. This has been true no matter who the head coach or general manager has been.
But at 6'6", 310, that speaks to just being a tackle.
Right. And especially when you read this. Now, this is from Lance Zierlein's report up at NFL.com. This is pretty interesting. An AFC personnel executive had this to say about Fischer. Fischer is the more naturally talented of the Notre Dame tackles. Joe Alt is much more consistent and technically sound. Natural talent is better than that of Joe Alt, who went pretty early, 5th overall in the first round of the NFL draft. That's certainly interesting.
So what it might be saying is once they get their hands on him and they can kind of fix some of the things that may have held them back, maybe Titus Howard won't have a choice. Maybe that whole tackle-only thing, maybe it doesn't start in 2024, but maybe 2025 he's either a guard or not on the Texans.
They've invested a lot in the offensive line the last couple of years.
They have.
Kenyon Green in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft. Last year, Juice Scruggs, an early second-round pick. And now this year, another second-round pick in Blake Fischer. I will say, when you got a quarterback like C.J. Stroud, I think you always should be looking for offensive linemen.
I mean, how many did they play last year?
So many.
Like,
I mean, my God, look at what they were doing at center at the end of the year. They had Michael Dieter, who was getting absolutely abused in the preseason at tackle, playing center, for God's sake. He had Drew Scruggs eventually in at left guard. You got to give George Fant a lot of credit. I thought he did a really good job as the swing tackle for the Texans last season. So now you got a guy who I guess has a little bit more upside than a George Fant with that second pick that you make today.
yeah, this clearly feels like a long-term play, whether it's to develop him to replace a guy like Titus Howard, if you're not going to keep him long-term, if they already feel that way, if they want to move Titus inside, or like to replace just George Fant, to replace the guy that you lost in free agency, which you clearly need. Like, they brought back Charlie Heck, who's been an okay draft pick for them, honestly, and pretty serviceable as a backup. That might be just what this is. This might just be a depth signing that they're looking at the swing tackle position as a position of need for this team in 2024. And this is how they're going to solve it. So if that's their strategy, I get it. And if you don't like what else you're seeing on the board, you just take best player available. And that might also be what we see here is you're taking the best player, which they might believe is Blake Fisher, and then you figure it out from there. I mean, now he joins his former Notre Dame teammate. Him and Jared Patterson share the field quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
Pat Patterson.
you've got two offensive linemen from the same school, and you've got Titus Howard, and you've got Drew Scruggs, Kenyon Green. They're giving themselves some options once again at the offensive line spot. So we'll see.
At Notre Dame, this is not a nickname he gave himself, but Blake Fisher also has a nickname.
Ooh.
Because of how welcoming he was to recruits. Blake Fisher is known as the mayor at Notre Dame.
I should have known that. Probably should have known that.
The mayor and the locksmith, the newest members of the 2024 Houston Texans.
All right. Draft is over. Let's just grade the draft. You drafted a locksmith and a mayor.
And a mayor.
A+.
Can you trust a politician?
Well, I didn't say you could trust them.
Well, hey, this guy might be protecting C.J. Stroud. So we're going to continue our coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. After this, don't go anywhere.
ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's NFL Draft Special continues. From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
Two new Houston Texans. First, it was, as he calls himself, the Locksmith himself. The Houston Texans added a corner, and now they add Blake Fischer, a tackle from Notre Dame. So there you go, guys. 2 picks already off the board. And 1 pick you will think will happen by the end of the night, assuming the Houston Texans do not trade up or trade out of the 3rd round.
And Lance has some of the same thoughts on Blake Fischer and Titus Howard that we do. He tweets about him here. Very talented tackle, can play on either side of tackle. What is curious is with Titus Howard's contract extension, it makes you wonder if the Texans believe they can potentially move Blake Fischer to guard early in his career to compete at left guard. Regardless, higher ceiling player. Just interested to see how the Texans plan on using him. So his thoughts are maybe Fischer to guard, because if the Titus Howard bio suggests anything, he's got no interest in being a guard. Now it doesn't really matter if the Texans think he's going to move, he'll move. But yeah, you talked about it. Blake Fischer never played guard. So is it a pick for the future, or is it a pick where they think they'll either make him a viable option this year at guard, which if I'm CJ, I'm like, hey, can you not make a first-time guard, a left guard for me this year?
Especially with how the off seasons are. If you're an offensive lineman, you really don't have much of an opportunity to work at your craft.
Yeah.
You can kind of work at it, but they don't allow full contact anymore. And this is one of the things that NFL coaches bitch and moan about all the time, is that the limited offseason time, which the players collectively bargained for, really hurts offensive linemen more than anything. And when you factor in that at the collegiate level, supposedly they're not learning that well at that level either. Well, here you have an offensive line crisis and lots of quarterbacks getting hurt.
Yeah, this pick to me, it probably signals that I'm gonna guess that Titus Howard's gonna be your left guard next year. I'll be honest. I don't think he's good at left guard. We see every time he has the responsibility to pull and go get someone, he's awful at it. He's slow. He's a good right tackle. He's not a great right tackle. He's good, but he's not a good left guard. But this is the kind of pick that maybe not. You hope Titus Howard's not your left guard. You hope it's Kenyon Green. But if Kenyon Green is not anywhere near the player that you ever wanted him to be, you're most likely expecting Titus Howard to fill that position. Because that's what happened last year, is all of a sudden you had no Kenyon Green and you didn't have Juice Scruggs, so Jarrett Patterson was your starting center and Titus Howard was your left guard. Or maybe it's Patterson and Scruggs, some combo as your center left guard. Once again, Nick Caserio, though, what he's done here with this position, kind of like what we were talking about with corner, is they've given themselves a bunch of cards, and they just have to figure out which one goes in the right place and how they're going to play it out. So it's just find your best 5 guys.
And this is an unfair question for you, but I'm going to ask it because who's looking for fairness? Do you think either one of these picks is starting week 1?
I don't, and I don't think it's the end of the world if neither of them start. But I did go into tonight hoping that the Texans would find, out of the 3 picks that they have, one guy who can play right away. At the same time, you do have to realize that this is a team that is very young, and there's going to need to be some development along the way, and you're hoping that D'Amico Ryans can get the most out of them, and maybe you speed up that timeline for some of these guys. But a nickel corner at a crowded nickel corner position and a tackle on a team that is paying a lot for 2 guys to play tackle, and Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard, it's going to be an uphill battle for these guys to play right away. If they do, great. You could theoretically trade some players. But, yeah, I'm not expecting day 1 play out of these guys. How about you, Joe?
I would lean Lassiter more likely to play than Fisher, just because, like, Juice Scruggs and Jared Patterson, they both played fine last year, whether it was at left guard or center. You have Kenyon Green, and just unless there's an injury, I just don't see where Blake Fischer fits into this group. With Lassiter, you at least, like, your talent at your cornerback position is 2 guys who are on their 3rd teams, and CJ Henderson and Jeffrey Okudah. So that one to me would make more sense.
Yeah, we'll see if if they profile him as an outside corner, because those two are those types, and of course he is the nickel, so maybe he's going against actually better players when we think about the types of a King or Miles Bryant. So I think I agree that I agree with Paul that I would be surprised if either one is starting. I would expect Lassiter to play,
definitely
get real snaps, and maybe eventually take over. And maybe he has a great preseason. These are all things that can change things. But as far as did the Texans, at least in my eyes, change their day one top 22? I don't think so. But if we're trusting in Caserio and the developmental track that D'Amico Ryans has laid out for him, then maybe we're wrong. But the Tyus Howard moving him or keeping him or moving Blake Fisher, that's now become maybe the most interesting thing as far as how the Texans treat that, because you got a guy who's explicitly telling you, I don't play this position anymore. Are you going to have any pushback?
Right, exactly. It's funny seeing some of the reports that are being put up by those who are following the draft from afar. This fellow by the name of Muench, I don't know who the hell that is, but seems to believe in Tytus Howard's ability as a guard.
I mean, every single mock draft you would look at, they would identify tackle as a position.
Because everyone
need for the Texans.
Because everyone believed that Tytus Howard was going to remain a guard.
Which, that seems illogical.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I mean, well, he played it, and I guess they just assumed. But we all know what he was drafted to be, and I don't. You know what? I don't blame anyone for not paying attention to the Texans during Tytus Howard's draft time. But we know he is supposed to be a tackle here.
Shaq Mason's your right guard.
Mm-hmm.
Your left guard, I mean, could be Juice Scruggs if Jarrett Patterson is healthy and is good at center. Could be Kenyon Green at left guard. I look at this right now, and
Are they going to have an open competition at right tackle?
It doesn't seem like that would be the case, unless they don't think that Tytus Howard is going to be able to come back from this injury, or they feel like he's getting injured a little bit too much. He did, of course, miss some time in the preseason and early in the regular season with the broken hand before the injury that kept him out the rest of the year. So maybe that's what they're thinking.
Look, our lads is not something you should point to and think, oh, that's how the depth chart would go. But this is one source or site that says Tytus Howard expected to be their starting left guard. And Blake Fisher, now that he's drafted, they slid him right in at right tackle. So maybe the belief nationally is that Tytus Howard, despite his protests and his original draft spot, is he's a guard. And that's why they think Blake Fisher or a tackle was an option for the Texans. I just know locally, certainly us, we're a little surprised that at least it was done in the second round.
Yeah. Here's the thing. No one yet cares that much about the Houston Texans, right?
This is what I said. If you didn't know that Tytus Howard was supposed to be a tackle, I could understand why, because who was paying that much attention?
Yeah, and plus it's easier to find guards typically than it is, or cheaper to find guards than it's tackles. So yeah, that definitely is outside perception versus reality. We all could be wrong.
Yep.
And they could be thinking maybe there's a reason why it's the opposite of what we're saying. Maybe there's a reason why everyone outside of Houston is assuming Tytus Howard's a left guard. Maybe there's some secret that we're not, on the inside of.
How many people do you think know that Tytus Howard was a first-round pick outside of Houston to play tackle out of Alabama State?
Probably a lot of people remember it because I remember the Texans getting crushed for that pick because they didn't take Andre Dillard, who got drafted by the Eagles. Oof. They didn't trade up for Andre Dillard, I think it was. Dillard went right before.
Dillard stunk.
He's not good. So the Texans got that one very right.
I believe he is completely out of the league right now.
I think that sounds right. It's not. It's not definitely been good for them in any ways. It is interesting. The following picks right after the Texans were offensive linemen. So there's a little run there once again on offensive line at the end of the second round. It looks like we're officially headed into the third round of the 2024 NFL draft. This is just it's a snoozer of a draft is how I describe it for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, it's not the most exciting thing. This is the worst thing in the world to not be exciting, especially after everyone got a massive pants 10 over the trade for Stephon Diggs. You got all of the flash you effing needed. They got Danielle Hunter. They got Stephon Diggs. They also got Danico Autry. So, I mean, they're adding 28 sacks from last year or something like that. Look, I know I sound like I'm carrying water and slurping up, the Houston Texans. I'm the Battle Red Bobo, but they've done a lot. They were very aggressive in free agency to a point that I think a lot of people were probably surprised by because that's just not what the Patriots used to do, and that's where Nick Caserio comes from.
Yeah, this is what probably you should have expected a little bit, just like a chill draft. I didn't think they would go offensive line though. Like that is a surprise. We never really, when we had our discussions about what do you want the Texans not to do.
It's a position of strength.
Yeah, we never specifically, we never outlined like offensive line. It's like, I don't want the Texans to do this. Now that they've done it, I'm a little just surprised because it never even crossed my mind that they would consider going offensive line, but they clearly view this as a need and probably just as a swing tackle. Like, it does remind me a little bit about, was Charlie Heck, I can't remember, he would have been the Nick Caserio draft, that first one, right, with Davis Mills. And it was kind of the same thing then. You had Titus and you had Tunsil, and they drafted a swing tackle in like the 5th round or 4th round, and everyone was like, what are you doing? Well, this is kind of the same exact thing, it might be, as that is. They are drafting in the 2nd round a position of just depth for this team versus a position of strength.
Mm-hmm. All right. Our coverage of the 2024 NFL draft continues. 2 Houston Texans selected today. Let's see. Look at this. This is my problem. My computer just keeps on screwing up all night long. Who do they pick? I don't even know. I'm just kidding. Kamari Lassiter, a cornerback out of Georgia. And most recently, the Texans took Blake Fischer, tackle out of Notre Dame. Our coverage of the draft continues after this.
You're listening to ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's 2024 NFL Draft Special. Now back to the Veritex Community Bank Studios with Paul Gallant, Joe George, and Del Olaleya.
2 picks by the Houston Texans tonight. Pick 42, Kamari Lassiter, cornerback, Georgia. Pick 59, Blake Fischer, tackle, Notre Dame. We've been talking about the most recent pick, Blake Fischer. A bit surprising just given the amount of money that the Houston Texans have invested in the offensive line. Tons of money to Laramie Tunsil. This offseason, tons of money already to Titus Howard, Shaq Mason, pretty good contract. A first-round pick in Kenyon Green in the 2022 NFL Draft. A second-round pick in Juice Scruggs in the 2023 NFL Draft. But, hey, you got to protect C.J. Stroud, so another bodyguard for the second-year quarterback.
I think these 2 picks may actually bring more questions than answers about the Texans.
No.
Particularly the second one. Lance he loves to interact. So if you love Lance Zierlein, he's out there tweeting about this particular pick.
What's Lance saying?
We know this is his thoughts, and I guess a lot of people believe are along those lines. We know that Titus Howard's not a good guard. So his thought is, it means that it's Blake Fisher. Do they think Blake Fisher's bumping down, or do they believe that he can compete and eventually take that job away? He does not believe it means that Titus Howard is going to bump down to be a left guard because it's not good. No one wants to see it anymore. And I guess maybe not most importantly, but certainly the guy who would play it doesn't want to see it anymore. And you go to Kamari Lassiter, it's like, is he going to be a starter day one? Is he going to beat out veteran corners at that spot as a rookie? In a year where you think you have a real shot to go do something? Are you going to have a guy learning on the job? I guess you want to put it that way. I have no answers for this. This didn't provide any answers for me as far as the Texans. I don't see a solid starter right now in either of those selections.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's going to bum some people out. These aren't finishing pieces. These are projects. You would think, and hey, look, hopefully they surprise all of us and they end up being immediate contributors for this team. But, yeah, it looks like it's going to be an uphill battle for them to get on the field right away. Now, you can take a look at some of the other teams that they're going to be competing with in the playoffs, assuming that everything goes right for the Texans this coming season. Does this help them beat a team like Baltimore? Does this help them beat a team like Kansas City? I would say in the case of a team like Baltimore, I felt like the biggest issue for the Houston Texans last year was just how much pressure was coming straight up the middle towards C.J. Stroud. Obviously, his receivers weren't getting open as quickly as he'd have liked. There was really only Nico Collins as far as receivers who are plus players for him to throw to. And I'd also say, too, on the defensive side of things, you know what? The defense actually held its own in the playoffs, ironically. It's the unit that they upgraded the most probably this offseason, especially through free agency. They had the big plays against the Browns, the pick sixes of Joe Flacco. And, and Texans offense just needed to do anything. They didn't help him out in the second half, and you get those 3 touchdown drives by the Ravens to open up the second half, and the game was done. So I don't think any of these guys really are fixing anything that seemed to be an issue at the end of last year.
Yeah, the gap, I get when you start to add big-name talents like Hunter and Diggs, you start to get really excited about what this team can be. But my concerns about their holes still remain. And whether they fill them after the draft by free agents who have waited until the draft to see who needs them, maybe that's the case, or maybe they feel very strongly about the rest of their draft and they'll find starters or at least guys who can give them a lot of snaps. I'm just not sure what they did tonight so far fills some of those requirements. You know what? If you're Nick Caserio and you believe you've built this team into a spot where this is all about finding maybe not depth, but guys after a year can fill in for veterans who you're signed to short-term deals. Okay, but it kind of doesn't reinforce some of the we're all in stuff. It doesn't.
Correct.
You're signing Diggs for a year. You're not even sure you're going to have him past this year. You gave him more money because you believe, for whatever reasons, maybe you had these conversations that a year of him being motivated, it's best for the team and for him. Then you're taking corners who have to compete, a lineman who I guess at least we're not sure is going to start. Maybe they're doing the whole 2 timeline thing, and they think these guys are part of a future around C.J. Stroud, and they also are going to make moves for the present.
Hey, you got to be thinking short term and long term. But yeah, I think definitely to what you said, perfectly stated, more questions than answers with these picks. Not to say that these players are bad. We have no effing clue.
No clue.
But definitely direction that we did not expect. Nickel corner and a guy who's played right tackle exclusively. We are in the third round. Couple of picks off the board to open things up. Another wide receiver, Malachi. What a name. Malachi Corley, wide receiver from Western Kentucky, goes to the New York Jets, who continue to add weapons for Aaron Rodgers. The Cardinals draft a running back in Trey Benson out of Florida State. That is a position that some people are hoping the Houston Texans end up picking at some point tonight, and I understand why. I am not, Dell, giving up on Dameon Pierce quite yet. I think he's super talented. I just think that the system is not a fit for his skills. I hope that those skills can find a way to work out here, because I do think that his ability to run through contact and break tackles is pretty elite as far as running backs go.
And do the Texans have a need for a short yardage back? Is that Dameon Pierce's role going forward? We know he didn't ascend to that role, or maybe even descend, because he was a starter in 2022 to that role. They did not find that role for him. And I haven't asked that question, but maybe next week I'll ask Lance about, can running backs shift who they are depending on scheme? Because we hear about Dameon Pierce, bad scheme fit. A year plus with D'Amico and now Bobby Slowick. Can they find a way to make him productive? Because even if it's just being a hammer, because Joe Mixon will get the bulk of the carries, we would suspect. But even if we're talking 3rd and 1, and we know Dameon Pierce loves to break tackles, and that was what we loved about him in year 1, can they turn him into that? I would hope, considering the promise he showed in year 1, that a simple scheme issue isn't the reason why he can't get real snaps.
Yeah, I agree. It's strange. I mean, he's clearly very talented. To what you said, I mean, shoot, go back to earlier in the year. He had the run of the season, right, against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, it was a hell of a run. But yeah, at the same time, you're like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah,
why isn't this working? It can't be that difficult of a scheme to pick up if you're bringing in Devin Singletary and then are totally fine with him walking away in free agency, and he has the kind of success that he had in his first year. But only 2 running backs selected thus far. Jonathan Brooks in the 2nd round. The Texas running back goes to the Carolina Panthers, and David Tepper, Trey Benson, the other one. We've seen a lot of wide receivers selected. We've seen today a lot of cornerbacks and a lot of defensive tackles selected. Obviously, there's, at this point in the draft, you're picking guys you like probably more than you're picking, like the absolute best player, consensus best player out there. Who are you seeing out there that floats your boat and you're hoping maybe is going to be around for either one, the Texans or maybe the Dolphins or someone?
Well, they don't have a pick until tomorrow.
There you go.
The 5th round, so
you don't even have to worry about the Dolphins anymore.
Don't even have to worry about that. Before I guess name a couple players, I'm interested in how people reconcile production on the college level with how the scouts start to talk about how these guys, maybe they got bad hand placement, or they're explosive and they've got elite explosiveness, and they go, wait a minute, the guy only had 4 sacks, so how explosive was he? And then people will react to, look at the tape. If you look at the tape, you see that he was getting close, but he didn't finish off plays. I think that's where we are at this point. Sure, we're deep into the 2nd round, the 3rd round. We're early into the 3rd round, so sure, you can still get real starters, real guys who can contribute. But now we're starting to talk about traits more than over or production over traits, or traits over production. Which one does your team go with? I am probably at this point, I would take traits over production, because a lot of things go into why a player gets and stacks up numbers.
Yes.
So if I'm either a Texans fan or a fan of another team, I'm hoping you go find a guy with elite traits that you hope you can mold. Because that's the other thing. People always talk about, well, he's not a finished product. He's not supposed to be.
None of them are.
Unless you're top of the top 1st rounder, you should have warts. And what is a coach's job? Mike Tomlin has talked about it. Our job is to teach and make sure those warts go away so this player can become the best he can be. So I don't like when guys knock a guy, well, how could you take him there? He's got warts. He's got things that are missing. That's what coaching is for, in my eyes. So that's where we are in the 3rd round. If you believe in your staff, go take a guy with traits and hope you can mold him into a player that maybe surpasses where he's drafted, because other people didn't believe they could work with him.
In D'Amico Ryans, you should be at a position of strength there. It seems like a lot of guys just like him. First off, it's a good place to start, I think, for a coach. I think you want to have the good cop more often than you want to have the bad cop, especially in 2024. Players are drifting more towards guys who, pioneers like Pete Carroll back in the day. I think they want guys like that more than they want some hard ass who's getting in their grill all the time and yelling at them and things like that. So you have that, but, sounded a little corny at his introductory press conference, but D'Amico Ryans is also a leader of men.
Of course,
and it's actually a leader of men that you buy.
You believe it, yeah.
You believe it because, look, he's young. He's played in the NFL, though, and he was a really good player. And I do think that there is something to that. And it's interesting to see that we're getting more players that are like that in the NFL these days, or excuse me, coaches that are like that in the NFL these days. Guys who actually play the game. It seems like we always had like these old rando guys, and you're like, wait, how the hell did you get here?
Yeah, the guys are getting more chances, and we see that we see in a lot of cases they turn out to be good ones. And D'Amico Ryans the latest on the list. If we're talking about a potential player the Texans can draft,
hit me.
I still like I still like them to go get a safety.
I'd like a safety too.
Now this guy is a guy I've watched quite a bit. Instinctual, makes plays, does gamble, and it's part of the reason why he's lower than maybe some of his on-field production would suggest. Once again, production over traits or traits over production, depending on where you are. Cam Kitchens, he was a ball hawk at Miami, intercepted 11 passes, has a couple pick sixes on his resume. He's a guy that needs to clean up some of his eye discipline. He's a guy who loves the gamble, which, safeties, that's not what you're supposed to do.
No.
There are very few who can do that and recover, namely a guy who played at the same university, Ed Reed. Didn't show that here. He was old man Reed by the time he got to Houston. But he was one of those instinctual types who generally guess right. Cam Kitchens, unfortunately, sometimes guess wrong, and it led to big plays. If he, like Lance has him as a fourth rounder, I could see him going there. But the Texans feel like maybe the safety board's not where they like. I could see him as a potential guy. You're drafting him in the third to the fourth round, so maybe he's not a guy who's going to start right away. But he's a guy, because of his big playability, if he's there, I wouldn't mind taking him. About 5'11", 200 pounds. He ran better at his pro day than his combine, so the 4.6 stuff that you'll see may be not indicative of how fast he really is.
Well, look, if he's anything like Ed Reed, holy crap. I mean, that's
I can't put that on him. I'm just saying.
He went to Miami. That's close enough.
I've seen enough of Miami safeties that it's not that close. It's not close. Trust me.
Where does he rank in the pantheon of Miami safeties? There's been a lot of good safeties. Sean Taylor.
Sure. I would say he's probably, as far as the guys who have come along since Ed Reed, he's probably a top 5-6 guy.
Okay.
Not of all time, but I'm talking about from
post Ed Reed.
Since